Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. It is early, as always, when we're doing the show. But nevertheless, despite it being early, there is a lot of news. I am not going to be able to get to all of it, unfortunately, because it is a lot of news. A lot of stuff is breaking at once that I have interest in. Duterte's getting picked up by the ICC. That is fascinating to me. It seems like they only pick on people who, have no political heft. In that sense, they often say they only go after African dictators. Okay, well, this one, Philippines. Dictator, no. Issues with the way he did drugs, I guess, is what their main issue is with him in regards to the ICC. So there's that taking place, kind of in its own little sandbox. Two big stories. One has to do with Chuck Schumer completely caving. Like, when I say cave, I mean his back breaks and it just folds completely over. Completely cave. Democrats are furious. I think Janice Anderson, she was on the show yesterday, said this is all performative. Janice, you were absolutely right. Entirely, completely, utter performance. And that performance came to an end when Schumer comes out and completely capitulates all at once. It's humiliating, to put it mildly. Why walk the plank if you don't have to walk the plank when you know at some point you're going to walk back from the plank? There's that. My big focus, or the thing I'm interested in, that I think a lot of people on social media may disagree with me with, but it has to do with Putin's response to Trump ceasefire, 30-day ceasefire proposal. The reason why I say I think many may disagree with me on this, in fact, Scott Ritter is going to be on at 7:15. I think he may even slightly disagree with me on this. I look at this through a lens of chess. Just be honest with you. You often have to work between the lines in chess. There is no straight path to the king under normal circumstances. You are stuck going through these movements that often make no sense, even though the movements, even the small ones, are meant to get you to the king, to the objective. I could be completely wrong. I could be talking out of my ass, and my bias could be leading me astray. I think that's what we're watching. Trump throws out the first move. It's a move he knows is going to be rejected, but he's trying to get something out that move and maybe even trap Putin into something. He most likely knows 90% Putin is not going to accept it. Putin is going to have to now do something in response. How he responds matters. Now, in my case, I think when I was having a conversation with Garland, I think two conversations were taking place. And I think both are right. One, what do you do in the overt sense, in the way that you're dealing with public opinion, public disposition around the world? You're talking to other world leaders and you're talking to other populations. Donald Trump says he wants a ceasefire. Now, we know, Putin knows, world leaders know, the ceasefire is nonsense. When they do that ceasefire, is Germany going to stop arming them? Is Britain going to stop arming them? Is these other countries going to stop giving them weapons? Is the US going to stop giving them weapons? So if not, then you are talking about a 30-day ceasefire with Ukrainian troops routed in Kursk, completely surrounded and about to be destroyed. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would they, when they're on the run on a 2,000-kilometer front, where they are being pushed back on all fronts, why would they accept a proposal like this? Meaning they already know it's going to be denied. The question is, how will it be denied? And is Trump going to be able to get something out of the denial, even if it's just political? Putin gives a response. And Garland, I think, pointed this out yesterday. Garland was right in his response. He takes a very political take on the response. But I was also right, because his underlings have already put out, no. Why would we accept this? No, just bluntly, no. Now, Putin comes out and gives a different response, even though it's the same thing. He gives a very political answer. And in that political answer, it's effectively, we want to end this. We appreciate you giving us a ceasefire. We do. And we do want to end this. We have conditions. There are things that we need to discuss in the context of the ceasefire. Now, the reason it's put in this kind of political cadence is because it does two things. One, we're reasonable people. We're reasonable. We don't want this war. We're not into this. But two, it also gives Trump space for negotiation. What I mean by that is by coming out saying there are things in this, we are perfectly fine with bringing this thing in. However, this will not be amidst three. We don't trust Ukraine. We don't even really trust you. So what we need are assurances. And once we get those assurances, we can, go towards some sort of ceasefire, if that's what you want to call it. Now, assurances, of course, are going to lead back to what Russia wanted in the first place. But this also gives Trump space to say, okay, well, this is not an outright rejection. And because it's not an outright rejection, there's now room for us to continue the discussion. A discussion that will take place as the Russian military continues their advance along the 2,000-kilometer line and allow as they destroy the Ukrainian military that is in Kursk. It's an opening. For my take, before Scott gets here, Trump has to work between the lines. You can threaten to leave it. You can say, I'm done, and you can walk. That is your option. That is political consequences. And those political consequences are unknowable. Yes, they would scream at you. They would say, Donald Trump lost the war. Donald Trump lost the war. They would even say, if it wasn't for Donald Trump, Ukraine would have gotten a better deal because Trump walked. Also, Trump never said he was going to walk. He said he was going to get a deal. Now, you can use walking as a way of trying to get a deal because, again, Zelensky's balls shrivel up when he hears that because he knows he is screwed if that happens. So you can use that as a threat, but it's leverage. It may not be something you actually want to do unless it's the nuclear option in dealing with all of this. You leave, Ukrainian military collapses, Russia takes it all, goes to the Polish border, etc. That is not really what you want. Also, you have Zelensky going rogue, going out here effectively saying, we are not going to give up our territories. Okay, well, this is somewhat different than what the Trump administration is effectively saying. And if you're the Russians and you hear this, what do you think? What do you think? How are you trying to get a ceasefire? And this guy is effectively saying, we're not giving up anything. That is different than what is coming out of the Trump White House. So personally, I think a dance is being played. I think this is what it looks like to unravel negotiations with the president of the United States that has to A, look strong, but B, also get a deal where he can say facing that deal. And what does it look like if a president is completely bending over backwards for a deal? He gets called weak. He gets called a Putin puppet. He gets called selling out Ukraine, meaning all this stuff comes out. Trump, I would wager, has to walk a line in this where he comes out of this not looking bad while simultaneously getting a deal. And if Putin is going to work with him on it, saying, hey, I'm not going to reject you outright, even though I've just rejected you outright. There's space to negotiate. Let's negotiate. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk. Let's do, etc. That gives leeway to the Trump administration to proceed and continue with his moves towards negotiations since Putin left the door open for negotiations. It's fascinating. I just think Trump has walked between the lines. This is Putin's response to Trump's 30-day ceasefire.
As for readiness of Ukraine for the ceasefire, I'll tell you my estimation of this. But first of all, I would like to thank the President of the United States for paying so much attention to regulating the conflict in Ukraine. Of course, we all have lots of current issues to deal with, and the chairman of China and the Prime Minister of India, heads of states of Brazil and South Africa, they are dealing with this issue and they're paying a lot of attention to this. And we're grateful for this. And we're hoping that their activity, we understand that their activity is aimed at reducing loss of human life in the conflict. Secondly, is we agree with the proposals for the ceasefire, but our position is based on the assumption that the ceasefire would lead to a long-term peace, something that would remove the initial reasons for the crisis. As for the readiness of Ukraine to ceasefire, there's a meeting between Americans and Ukrainians in Saudi Arabia, and it looks like a decision that is taken by Ukrainian side under American pressure. In reality, I am completely convinced that Ukraine had to ask Ukrainians, ask Americans, insist on this, based on the situation on the ground.
Effectively, look, you guys are asking us for a ceasefire because you are getting your answers handed to you. Why would we do that? By the same token, we appreciate this. Now, I am super curious. I mean, by the way, Trump responded to this. And just to give Trump's response, understand the US president has very little leverage in this either. And I suppose there are three options. You go to nuclear war, which I would imagine Trump doesn't want to do. You can go back to standard. Okay, we're going to give them weapons and intelligence, which has failed and is failing. Or you're trying to find a solution. And I guess my take is, sorry about that. My take is find a solution. You're Trump, you're the deal maker, make the deal. The catch is, how do you make that deal and get out of this without looking weak? And keep in mind, I'm saying this knowing that Trump in this situation is very weak. Now, the negotiations that they're having, apparently they're negotiations over Nord Stream. Apparently they're negotiations on Iran. Apparently they're negotiations, meaning whatever negotiation they have is going to go beyond Ukraine. I guess the question is, what are those negotiations? And what are they going to be aiming for in order to end the conflict? Conflicts are very easy to start, very hard to end. And having to unravel 3 years of outright maniac hysteria, I would imagine is not necessarily the easiest thing to do when you're in a political climate with people screaming that they want the war to keep going, especially those goofballs in Europe. So Trump, in his response, okay, I'll go back to Trump's response later. I want to go to my guest because I am super curious on his take on all of this. We are joined, there we are. We're joined by the one and only Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter is a weapons of mass destruction whistleblower. Scott, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing great, thanks. Yourself?
I am doing great. And I am super curious on your take on everything that has been taking place over the last, 30-day ceasefire, Putin's response to the ceasefire. How do you view this? Because I think we may slightly disagree, which is great. I don't want this to be an echo chamber. But give me your take on this. Trump comes out, sends Rubio, Walz, Wiskoff, over to negotiate with Ukraine. I found that to be very weird, but whatever. They come back with a 30-day ceasefire that was dead on arrival since it was already told, we don't want that. We're not going to accept that. You guys are being routed in Kursk. You guys are being pushed back on a 2,000-kilometer front. Why would we accept a ceasefire? This is going to be a no. They put it out knowing it was going to be a no. Putin responds effectively saying, okay, well, look, there are things in this. We want it in this war. And we're open to this. But there are things in this that, of course, need to change with the assurances associated with it, which effectively allows an open door for further negotiations that I would imagine are going to take place. How do you view this? I saw your social media posts. You weren't happy about Trump's 30-day ceasefire. Give me your take on all this.
Well, let me just start off by my wife often tells me that when I see breaking news that because she reminds me that once upon a time I was a professional analyst, a pretty damn good one, whose briefings were done to the Secretary General of the United Nations, to four-star generals, commanders in chief, the President of the United States. And I had a very good reputation of being sober, of getting it right all the time. That's why they relied upon me. But one of the beauties of back then is we didn't have social media. So normally when you got a piece of information, you could excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, kick a trash can, head smash a window, then step back and go, all right, what do we got here? And then come back in and then get back to the sober business. But, now I have social media. And so I see something and immediately, normally too, I wake up in the morning like I did this morning. I was very disciplined this morning. I'm very proud of myself. But I grab my phone and I go through, scroll through, and normally that's when I start putting out stuff. If you look at the time of my response, that's when it was happening, and it's early morning, so I'm not actually fully, alert, and I start tweeting, and it's an honest tweet. It's an honest reflection of how I'm feeling at the moment. But generally speaking, when you do a knee-jerk social media post of that nature, it's probably not the most balanced assessment, and it's not one that allows you to take that step back and say, okay, let's look at the bigger picture here. And I'll also be honest that trying to follow Trump's logic sometimes, especially for a person that's very logic oriented, myself, is a journey down the rabbit hole. I mean, it's like chasing Alice. You're just like, what the hell's going on? I have no idea. The rabbit here, this, that. But when I took a step back, first of all, let's set this up. My tweets were a result of looking at Riyadh in a vacuum. That was my mistake. You never look at anything in a vacuum. As if I evaluate that tweet as if the Rubio Waltz meeting with Yermak and the Ukrainians was the meeting. That was it. But when I took a step back, I went, wait a minute. That's not the meeting. It's a nothing burger. It's literally nothing. We have to go backwards. We have to go back and say, well, wait, Trump's already had the talk with Putin. I mean, if you look at Riyadh as Rubio talking with Yermak and you treat it as if that's it, then you forget the fact that Trump already had a 90-minute conversation with Putin. And then you also forget the fact that why is Yermak the head of the Ukrainian delegation and Zelensky isn't? Zelensky's in Saudi Arabia meeting with the crown prince. He's the president of Ukraine. He's the commander in chief, but he's not at the negotiating table. Why? Oh, yeah, the United States refused to let him negotiate. Well, that's sort of an important fact, that the Ukrainian negotiating team doesn't include the president because the United States says we don't want to talk to him. Why? Because he's an irrational cocaine-fueled maniac. Oh, that's relevant too. So we have Putin already talking to Trump. We have the Russians already laying out their perspectives. We have the Trump administration agreeing with 90% of the Russian perspective, especially on the major issues of the day, such as Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. That's an important fact because right after the Rubio-Yermak agreement, in quotations, Zelensky came out and said, you can't tell us we can't be a member of NATO. Well, geez, that sort of means that you're not serious about this negotiation, and they're not. We also have to remember what happened immediately after this negotiation happened. The immediate explosion on social media of every leader in Europe going, we love ceasefires. We think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the ball is in Putin's court. That's the key phrase. The ball is in Putin's court, because that's what Marco Rubio said. Now, when you see something like this, where somebody comes out and says something, then immediately the same sentiment is echoed. That isn't spontaneous, because statistically speaking, you can't get that many high-level people on their own volition to go, wow, Marco Rubio's a genius. Give me my phone. I love ceasefires. The ball's in Putin's court. Boom. And they all say the same thing. There's always going to be some nuance. This means that this was coordinated in advance, that what happened in Riyadh was a foregone conclusion. Then you have to ask yourself, why? Was the European response consistent? That's another thing a sober analyst will say. Is this consistent with the European? Wait a minute. It's not just inconsistent. It's 180 degrees inconsistent, because right before the meeting in Riyadh, Europe was saying the following: we need to humble Russia on the battlefield. There can be no ceasefire. We must defeat Russia on the battlefield. That was the statement of everybody in Europe. And suddenly ceasefires are wonderful. And the ball's in Putin's court. This was a trap set by Trump to trap Europe into accepting the process of ceasefire, something that they hadn't, because prior to that, they were talking about mobilizing, all of Europe. The British were like, we have to draft people right now. Von der Leyen, 800 billion euros need to be generated right now. We need to do this. We need to do that. We have to humble the Russians on the battlefield. That's literally a quote. We must humble the Russians on the battlefield. No ceasefire. And suddenly they're all saying the ceasefire, the ball's in Putin's court. So again, you trap Europe into accepting a process that leads to a ceasefire, because it is a process. You can't say we are dictating to Russia. They didn't say we're dictating to Russia. They said the ball's in Putin's court. That implies a game. You just volley the ball over to Putin. So now Witkoff flies to Moscow as Putin receives the serve. And did Putin say, we're not playing the game, throw down his racket and walk off the court? Nope. Putin went, game on, baby. Here comes your serve, and we send it back to you saying, we love this game. We think ceasefires are beautiful. And we'd be willing to do it today, but we have some questions. How are we going to monitor this? I mean, is it really a ceasefire to an end of a conflict? What about arms shipments? Things like that. We'd love to do this, baby. We want to do it right now. Right now. We'd love to have a ceasefire, but we can't because there's no details. Ball's back in your court. And that's what happened here. That's what happened. This is a process. This is a game. And we have to remember that while the United States would love this to be a game between the U.S. and Russia, with Ukraine sitting on the sideline, we're happy to do that. We have the European factor. Let's take another step back, as all analysts must do, and say, what are we talking about here? I mean, to give you an example, in the military, if I'm focused on Hill 861, right? Ritter, take Hill 861. Good, yes, sir. We're going to take Hill 861. Marines, get online. We're taking Hill 861. Marines are dying. Damn thing. Take 861. Take it, because I was ordered to take it. And then I go, oh, I'm down. We're all dying. Then I ask the question, why are we taking Hill 861? I should have listened to my commander, because what he really said is, we need to cut off communications to Highway 6. We have to keep the enemy from going over Highway 6. And Hill 861 is a dominating height that can allow us to have fire control over Highway 6. So let's take 861. But I can't. The enemy's too dug in. If I continue to go after 861, not only am I going to die on 861, I'm not cutting Highway 6. But if I step back and go, boy, my job's to cut Highway 6, not take 861. Maybe I can find another way to cut Highway 6 that doesn't result in all of my Marines dying. So you got to take a step back and look at the broader picture.
I agree with you, by the way. I agree with everything you just. I agree with everything you just said.
But you said we didn't.
Yeah, because I thought you were going to basically put a knife in.
No. But I'll just say the big picture here is America disentangling itself from Europe. And a key element to that, the first step, but not the only step, is to bring it into the conflict in Ukraine. But the second step, the master step, the highway, cutting Highway 61 or Highway 6 thing, is there has to be peace between Europe and Russia. This isn't just about ending the conflict in Ukraine. There has to be peaceful coexistence between Europe and Russia before the United States can withdraw. We don't win the game by having peace in Ukraine, pulling out, and having Europe and Russia doing this. because we're still entangled in that. So the big picture is how to get Europe and Russia to come together, which is why it was essential to trap Europe into the peace process, to get Europe off the track of we have to humble Russia on the battlefield. That's not good for American policy. We accept a ceasefire. That's good for American policy. And so there's the European factor that plays into this, that complicates things. And we have to give Trump credit for early on in this process, getting the Europe sucked into the ceasefire thing. You know, I'm not saying that Trump is perfect. I'm not saying that his methodologies are the methodologies that are out of, diplomacy 101 as taught in Georgetown. It's not. This is Trump world. It's a whole new game. But when you take a step back and you have a sober assessment of what's going on, we are on the path towards a comprehensive peace. We are on the path towards a comprehensive peace. We have not achieved a comprehensive peace. That's down the road. But they're talking. One of the key things in diplomacy is that you continue to talk. The Russians didn't pack their bags and go home. The Americans didn't pack their bags and go home. There's open lines of communication, and it's towards a commonly accepted objective of a ceasefire. So I'm cautiously optimistic, in all of this. It's not perfect, but it was never going to be perfect. This is a very, very difficult problem.
Yeah. I guess my thing is, I agree with you. I agree with you fully on this, that this is theater on some level, and a lot of it is theater. There's an underlying thing of, okay, well, we have our priorities. Those priorities need to be met. If we can get ceasefire and negotiations, then that's what we want anyway. And we'll pursue those negotiations while we continue to destroy the Ukrainian military on the battlefield until we get to a line that we like. And then, okay, let's settle this, right? And I also took it as, you need to bring a horse to water, which is Ukraine. You need somebody, some legal entity in Ukraine to sign a document saying, fair enough, we surrender. And the catch is, when you have Zelensky going rogue, okay, how do you bring a horse that went to the RADA and had them to pass a law saying, we won't negotiate? You got to get that guy to negotiate. Meaning Trump, and I don't know how you impose that, as opposed to, let's come up with a process to get Ukraine saying, okay, we're okay with the ceasefire. In which case, Russia comes back with, this is a no, but we're open to negotiations. Okay, well, the person who said they couldn't negotiate is now stuck in a negotiation process that they said they were never going to be involved in. So I agree with you. I guess I got to be honest.
It's even more complicated than that, because they're not stuck in a negotiation process. The Ukrainians have said, we're not negotiating. I mean, even after Riyadh, if you look at all the statements that come out, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not. So what Ukraine has done has defined themselves as the problem. And this is another beauty of this process. The Russians are willing to talk. The Americans are willing to talk. The Europeans are anxious to hear what this conversation is. And Ukraine, Zelensky has said, we're not willing to do any of this. 2014 borders, Crimea comes back to us. We will be a member of NATO. You can't do this. And they basically have isolated themselves, which again is, I think, part of the Trump strategy. And I predict that Zelensky won't be president in the next 2 weeks, that he has been isolated as the problem. And the Ukrainians are going to be told, if you don't fix this problem, understand that we're going to finish this thing and we're going to make all the decisions and it's going to be imposed on you. If you want to be at the table, get rid of that thing and bring something in here that's willing to sit down and do this responsibly. But Zelensky has basically self-destructed as a result of this process. He was kept out of Riyadh. Then the Ukrainian negotiating team left the door open to things that Zelensky has now turned around and slammed the door to. We know for a fact that the United States itself will not commit to a peace agreement where we demand that Ukraine be allowed to join NATO, because we know that the Russians will never allow that. That's Zelensky's thing. We can go down the list. Zelensky has basically opted out of everything the United States has already reached agreement with Russia on. Yeah. So he is the problem. There's already talk inside Kiev that they are going to get rid of him and replace him with something else. And I think that was an important part of this process as well.
Yeah, Financial Times is reporting that Zelensky is on his last days. The Trump administration has been apparently reaching out to elements in Ukraine to find their man for this. And I'm saying it their man because at the end of the day, as you pointed out, they need to have somebody who signed a document. It can't be Zelensky. Zelensky has gone rogue. He has effectively repudiated everything that the U.S. had effectively agreed on. And a statement, I have a clip of him coming out saying, we're not giving up anything. We're not recognizing any of this stuff. So, okay, that is different.
But he was conciliatory this morning. I was very impressed that he woke up and he said, as a good faith measure, we're going to withdraw from Kursk. Lord, man, you snipped some good stuff this morning. You didn't just get the white powder that got you going. You put some magic mushrooms in that thing.
Oh, that is horrible. That is horrible. Yeah. Okay, they could try. They're in circle. Good luck with that. Good luck with
they're
that.
voluntarily doing it as a good faith gesture.
Yeah. That's what they're going to call it. Just running, with their arms in their air, trying to get away from people, shooting at them.
Yeah, we're withdrawn from Stalingrad. Good faith gesture. Good faith gesture. We're giving up Stalingrad.
Do you expect political instability in Ukraine, meaning it basically an implosion of the government? Because you're right. It seems like Zelensky is on his last days. So what does it mean that he's on his last days?
Well, there's definitely Ukraine is going to have to go through a major redefining process, whether it's done, on their own volition or it's imposed. I think it's going to be a combination of the two. But the Zelensky is a byproduct. The modern iteration of the Zelensky government is a byproduct of the disease of ultranationalism in Ukraine, the Banderist ideology. The West is slowly waking up to the fact that they have a Ukraine problem, and it's called Nazis. It's real. And the Ukrainian society appears to be recognized. The European, again, nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything happens, things start to come in alignment. You just had the European court find that Ukraine was responsible for the horrific murders that took place in Odessa in 2014, May. Yeah. The murder of 84 or 48 Russians and injured 250 others. They threw in their throwaway thing. Well, the Russian propaganda, this, that, and the other. Okay, but let's get to the facts. They were murdered by Ukrainian nationalists, by Nazis. And one of the ringleaders of this, a guy named Gamu or something of that nature, who was in Odessa, hijacking men and putting them on buses, never went to the front line himself because most Nazis are cowards, was assassinated on the streets. Guy just walked up, popped him twice in the head, killed him. And I think the reason why is that Ukraine is going to start purging itself of the cancer of Ukrainian ultranationalism, especially in the East, and in places like Odessa, Kharkov, Dnipro, and places where these ultras, there was a sickness in Ukraine that predates the 2014 Maidan. And ultranationalism wasn't just defined by the Banderists in the West, but by these soccer hooligans, these right-wing, soccer clubs that just went violent in Kharkov, etc. They have become the heart. The fact that when you look at the Azov Battalion, which started as Azov Battalion, went to a brigade, and now it's 3rd Assault, and there's other things. Many of their original members didn't come from Lvov or the West. They came from Kharkov. They came from the East. Many of them are Russian speakers who have, because of the economic collapse of Ukraine and the corruption, they formed these clubs of ultra-nationalists who have taken on it's like what happened in Russia in the 1990s, early 1990s, in the suburb of Lubertsy. You had these weightlifting clubs of Russian youth that because there was a lost society, a lost generation, central authority went down so they're in the weight rooms lifting weights, shirts off, shaving their heads, and next thing you know, they're putting swastikas on their arm. You're like, wait, you're a Russian in Moscow putting a swastika on your arm. How does that happen? It happens because society is totally collapsed, and you get these vacuums of insanity. Well, that happened in Kharkov and elsewhere. These are going to have to be purged. They can't be part of post-conflict Ukraine. And so I think what you're seeing is the beginnings of a recognition on the part of normal Ukrainians saying, we need to get rid of this cancer. And I think that that's going to come from every aspect of Ukrainian society as they seek to isolate this cancer of ultra nationalism. And then I think a post-conflict settlement, because remember, one of the Russians' preconditions for conflict termination is denazification.
Yeah.
And so there's going to have to be a new government. Zelensky has to go, and there may be interim. If you remember when Hitler popped himself in the head, the Nazi regime continued for a few days, and there was Admiral Donitz who took over the head. You had Himmler trying to be the head, but basically it comes down to this. Hitler killed himself. General Krebs went to General Chuikov in Berlin and said, we would like to negotiate the terms of the surrender of Berlin. And Chuikov went, signed the piece of paper. There is no negotiation. You don't get to set any terms. The war is over. You can sign and live. You cannot sign and die. And that's the situation we're going to end up in. And I think one of the reasons why the United States is buying into a process is that it allows for additional clarity on the battlefield. You alluded this earlier in the statement. For instance, Russia could not enter into a ceasefire where the forces stopped as long as Ukrainians were in Kursk. That's not going to happen. So I mean, I don't know if it's going to be today, tomorrow, later this week. Well, Kursk is going to be purged, and the Russians are going to push forward and create a buffer zone in Sumy. And now we have the interesting thing where the Russians have even more Ukrainian land to give back in a negotiation if that's what they want to do. And on the Eastern Front, you see, Putin and Gerasimov alluded to it. We're going to have more encirclements soon on the Eastern Front as Ukrainian position collapses. They have no manpower left, and the Russians will start encircling and driving them back even further. You're going to see a more rapid the collapse of the Ukrainian defense. And as this war goes on, you're going to find by the end of this month, a lot of the issues of, the Ukrainians have to return land are going to be resolved because the Russians will already have the land. And if this continues on into the summer, Russia will get all of the land and more. And I think that's the point that many of the Ukrainians who aren't named Zelensky are waking up to, that, the longer we wait, the worse the outcome is going to be. That the sooner we acknowledge certain realities, like Russia is going to get everything that the Russian Constitution says belongs to them, the sooner we can bring this war to an end. But if we continue to hold on to the fantasy that we can somehow dictate an outcome that reverses reality on the battlefield, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. So, there's, again, we're in a process. And the fact that the United States has committed to a process means implicitly that we support Russia defining battlefield reality more clearly, because it makes our job easier as a negotiation. Imagine being an American negotiator at the table trying to deal with Kursk, with Ukrainian troops in Kursk.
Yeah.
That's just a reality. You can't just throw that chip away. So you got to tell the Russians, well, you don't own Kursk. So what are you going to give us for Kursk? If we tell the Ukrainians to get out of Kursk, what are you going to give us for Kursk? That's just negotiation 101. We don't get to say that anymore. We go, well, you guys own Kursk, so I guess we're not talking about Kursk anymore. But about Sumy now. You guys have gone into Sumy. You're 25 kilometers deep in a buffer zone. We'd like to get your troops out of Sumy. What do you need to get out of sea? It's been reversed now. The Russians are the ones saying, we got your territory. What do you want to get it back? And I think that is the kind of leverage and pressure that needs to be placed on the Ukrainians. They can't live in this artificial construct where they believe they have a say. This is like the Japanese going up to the battleship Missouri saying, well, before we sit down and sign this document, we'd like to get your troops off of Okinawa. Can you guys leave Okinawa, please? And we're like, no, we just took it. We're not getting rid of it back. We're not going to give it back for decades, maybe never. You're going to have Marines on Okinawa forever. But my point is, you don't get to negotiate when you've lost the war. Yeah. And right now, the Ukrainians are operating under the perception that that they haven't lost the war, that there's still hope. And I think, unfortunately, we've got to deflate that hope balloon.
How do they believe there's hope in this situation? Like, this seems delusional to me. They are being routed, and there are going to be major psychological consequences once Kursk is fully cleared. And they realize, oh my God, we've lost, 70,000 people in this fool zone where the expectations and the objectives were unclear. That is astonishing to me. I got to be honest, the number of people that have lost their lives just in Kursk alone is just mind-blowing. And they continue to put forces, or at the very least, they tried to keep going as long as they could on this. I want to go to Europe for a bit. I'm fascinated with the freak out that is taking place in Europe right now. You pointed to all of those tweets that ball is in Russia's court. The ball is in Russia's court. How does Trump believe he is going to get these lunatics online? And just to show you one, this is one of your favorites, Keir Starmer. Listen to what he says. Again, this is fully delusional, but this is what is coming out of Europe. It's astonishing.
But we know some basics. Putin's appetite for conflict and for chaos is already there, and it will only grow. And Russia is already menacing our skies, our waters, our streets, and our national security. And that's why I believe the fundamental task of politics right now is to take the tough decisions on security.
What is he talking about? Russia is menacing the streets of Europe? What is he talking about?
This is the Skripal, Novichok chemical attack that they've alleged. And the Russians have come straight out and said, we had nothing to do with it. You made it all up. Why don't you come clean? Why don't you present us with the Skripal family? The people we're trying to kill with the world's most deadly chemical agent, Novichok. You touch it and you apparently vaporize. It's just like, oh, boom. It's like a Marvel movie. I'm being facetious here, but it's supposed to be the most dangerous substance in the world. And yet both the husband and the father and the daughter lived, but they've never brought them in to talk. No tests. Everything's done in secret. This is the same stuff that went in Navalny's underwear, and didn't kill him either. It's just manufactured crap out of England. England, just so people know, and I've dealt with MI6 and I've dealt with British intelligence and the British mentality. They make stuff up. That's what they live to do. It's all about deception. It's just deception, dear boy. Yes, it's a game of trying to create an alternative reality that shapes the facts for the other side so that they do things that we then can exploit. And I said, so you're lying. Oh boy, we don't like to call it a lie. We like to call it an alternative viewpoint based upon facts that simply don't exist. So it's a lie. I mean, the British are liars, straight up liars across the board. They can't tell the truth. There's what I'm going to say. I'm sorry to my British colleagues. You're incapable of telling the truth. You can throw the similar accusation back at us. But I'm telling you right now, as an American, I'll at least admit when we tell a lie. You can't admit it because you're liars. You're born liars. You can't tell the truth. And everything Starmer said there is a manufactured narrative. Remember, the British are the ones that went, oh dear, we need weapons of mass destruction out of Iraq. Why don't we just call up the Telegraph and tell them, wrote a headline that says that Saddam Hussein can fire chemical weapons against England within 45 minutes, and they will put out a dodgy dossier. And I know the guy who wrote the dodgy dossier, and I've talked to him about it. What the hell are you doing? Well, Scott, we had to get something out there to shape the narrative. You lied, and we went to war. And what I really hate the British for, and I'll look you in every single Brit in the eye, 4,000 Americans died because of you. You You're the ones that could have stopped this. You could have stood up to George Bush. You had your guys sitting there when George Bush said, well, we got WMD and we got to fix the narrative, the WMD. The British could have went, no, we're not going to lie. You've made a case and you don't have the facts. We're not going to war over this made up case. But they did. And they went, sure, we'll put out the dodgy dossier. We'll lie because that's what we do better than anybody. We lie. Keir Starmer is sitting there lying through his teeth. The Russians aren't in the streets of London. They're not in the airs over England. They're not in the waters off. Yes, Russian ships go through the English Channel. So does everybody else. Keir Starmer is a liar. And but the other thing is he's a failed politician. I don't know how see, what happens when politicians look at their career collapsing is they try to create external threats. Because the last thing you want the British doing right now is looking at the disaster that their country has become. A disaster. It is crumbling. I'd be embarrassed to wake up in the morning, call myself an Englishman. It's an embarrassment. And you've brought in these politicians who are incapable of solving the problems of British society. So what are they doing right now? Why is Starmer talking about going to war with Russia, a war that the 75,000 strong British army wouldn't survive the first week? And he's saying, we're going to mobilize everybody. Well, wait a minute. Why don't you show that same enthusiasm for solving, getting the British trains to run on time, or getting the health system up, or doing all the other things that aren't happening in England? But you're saying, no, we have to mobilize and we don't care about anything else except confronting Russia in a conflict that there's no logical predicate for. There's no reason for England to be going to war with Russia other than the domestic problems of England. And that's what's happening here. Starmer is insane.
But this is all of Europe. Like, it's not just him.
Insane.
It's every one of those goofballs that wrote "The Ball is in Russia's Court" is acting and saying very similar things as Starmer in this situation. I guess my thing is, Trump, as you pointed out, he is trying to get a new European security architecture. It's not just about Ukraine. It's about what does Europe and Russia look like into the foreseeable future, and how do we set something up where in 5 years, 10 years, we're not back in the situation where NATO and Russia are nearly at loggerheads again.
Yep.
How do you do that with goofballs like this?
Well, Trump, I think this is part of the process. Again, this is taking a step back. And now we come into the other difficult part of professional analysis, doing predictive analysis. You see, bosses don't just want to hear about what's going on now. Well, thank you, Scott. I can read the map too. Okay, boss, tell me how the arrows are going to move in 2 weeks. Where are we going to be in 2 weeks? Now we're in trouble because now you want me to get the crystal ball and look into the future.
Oh, I get it. This is dangerous.
But look in the future. It's actually not as hard as you think. And I'll tell you why. If you're able to step back and reverse engineer where we are now and identify the dots that got us there, then put those dots on a reverse trajectory, and then follow those dots up to where we are, and now logically project those dots. You see, now you're just not making stuff up. Now there's a process of analysis where you are now looking at the trajectory. It's looking at a ship. If I'm on a ship and we have built up a head of steam and we're moving in this direction, and the captain turns to me and says, Scott, where are we going to be in 50 minutes? Well, boss, we're on a ship. It's got certain mass, certain trajectory. We're headed in that direction. My prediction is we're going to be about 50 kilometers straight ahead. Well, Scott, now I've put a little bit of right rudder. Okay, I'm going to do, boss, I think if we continue on this current thing, we're going to be about 50 kilometers in that direction. See, I'm not making stuff. I'm just doing predictive analysis. So now when I look at all of this stuff about Europe, here's the thing. The debate that the Europeans are having right now is centered on the notion that America, there's two debates that are happening. It's happening simultaneously. It's actually pretty entertaining to watch. Because the first one is the petulant child. Well, we don't need mommy and daddy anymore. We're going to go off on our own. And I'm going to buy a new BMW. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I'm declaring my independence. But mommy, can I stay in the house and can you pay rent for the next 6 months while I do all this independent stuff? And it's the British. We're going to do this, but we need the American backstop. Everything.
Right.
We're going to flex our own, but we need the American backstop. We need the American backstop. Well, then it's all manufactured, because what you're saying is you're relying upon America. And what Trump is trying to do is turn to them and say, the American backstop isn't going to be there the way you want it to be. That's like mommy and daddy saying, you can't live in the house anymore. You got to go out. You got to fly, little birdie, fly, leave the nest. Which means maybe you don't get a BMW. Maybe you get a 15-year-old Honda Accord, a starter car. Maybe you don't get to live in the Hamptons. You got to get a one-room studio apartment in sort of a seedy part of town. Maybe you have to make adjustments, get a job, get a savings account, do investments so you can grow to where you want to be, but you have to start somewhere. And I think what the United States is confronting Europe is the reality that you don't get to bluster and flex and all this stuff, and yet continue to believe that the American backstop's going to be there. We're not going to be there. So you have to readjust your thinking. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But again, just to show you an example, Ursula von der Leyen is out there talking about 800 billion.
Yes.
800 billion euros. Big number. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it happens. Maybe because they're stupid enough to try and do it. I mean, they really are. But again, the dots. I always look at the dots. The Germans tried to do this in 2022. You remember that, don't you? Olaf Scholz. Oh,
Yes.
the Russians are the biggest threat in the world. We need 100 billion euro in immediate financing to build the German military up. And they did it. They actually went out and borrowed 100 billion from themselves, which the Germans don't like to do, at 14% interest rate, I think it was. Well, the first thing that happens when you borrow the money, the banks are just cold, man. You know this. Anybody who's dealt with American banks, you know it. They're all nice and dandy. Yes, home equity loan. Yes, refinancing. Da da da. Sign the document. Boom, boom, boom. Then next month, the bill. You owe us this payment. Well, shoot, man. But I borrowed this much money and I needed it to buy my Porsche. And now you're telling me I can't buy my Porsche because I got to start paying the money back with interest. Oh. And what happened is the German 100 billion started shrinking immediately. So if they thought they had 100 billion to go out and do things, within the first month, they were down to 67 billion because they had to start making payments. And then next thing you know, they had to start letting contracts out, but the contracts are over time. And so as they're doing this over time, the payments still have to come in. So by the time they first start purchasing things for their rejuvenated German military, they're down to 50 billion in the bank, half of what they originally allocated. And then they're starting to buy, and they can't do it. And then the big problem is that 100 billion was supposed to refurbish a home that when they told the bank, we need this for a home improvement, the bank went, how's your house? Normally the bank would say, we're going to get an inspector to look at the house. But this time the bank sort of said, no, we're going to accept that your house is, the house ain't a house that just needs a new roof, new flooring, new windows. That's what you get a home equity loan for. This house is rotten to the core, black mold, rotting foundation. This house can't be refurbished. It needs to be torn down and start from the ground up. That's the reality of the European defense infrastructure. It is rotten to the core. It doesn't work. That 100 billion is going to solve nothing. The 800 billion that Ursula von der Leyen is talking about, will not be 800 billion. By the time they begin to let the contracts and all that stuff, it's going to be down to half of that, 400 billion. And 400 billion ain't going to begin to touch the cost of rebuilding this. The best thing Europe could do is start from scratch and say, okay, what do we realistically need? Because as long as Europe believes that they're going to try and reinvent a wheel, it's like buying a castle in France.
Yeah.
And you look at the old drawings, that was a grand castle back in 1630. There were knights in shining armor, and there was a round table and a guy named King Arthur hanging out, and women were beautiful. And I want that castle. And you get there, and it's a crumbling mass of rocks. Nobody's there. The fields are foul. And you're going, wait a minute, this ain't the castle. And you want me to pay, I got to pay taxes on this, but I need to build it up. I can't afford it. We have to educate Europe that what they think they want, they can't afford. They can't afford. And then the other part of that is They think they want it because they think there's a threat, or they've created the notion of a threat.
Created.
Our job is to create a reality where it is so apparent that that threat doesn't exist, that the politicians can't continue to articulate that they need a response. This is a process that I think the Trump administration is engaged in.
Real quick, do you honestly believe that they believe there's a threat? Like, I gotta be honest, I can't tell if they're lying or if they actually believe there's a threat. Meaning, if you're just looking at this, you say to yourself, okay, well, the William Burns memo pointed out that Russia didn't want to invade Ukraine, but they were going to be pushed to do so. In fact, I go further. If you have a couple of minutes, Arestovich and many of his ilk also made the point before the war that Russia is going to have to intervene into Ukraine in order to prevent Ukraine from getting into NATO. Meaning they knew this. They knew all of this going into it, what they were doing, and why they were doing it. So that's why I'm asking the question. Considering Burns and the memo, he's not a psychic. He just pointed out reality in the way reality was. Do they honestly believe there's a threat? Or is all of this posturing in order to stick it to the Russians and build up a military and all of this other stuff? Or do they actually believe it? Are they really terrified? In the beginning, it was Russia's a gas station masquerading as a country. They're running out of missiles, they're running out of weapons. And now it's, oh my God, we're terrified. That is a 1 million-man military that has been killing and dying for the last 3 years. They are modern, and we have nothing that can touch it. So give me your take on that. Like, do they honestly believe that there's a threat? Or is this posturing, in a sense, with this kind of old-time Napoleonic, I'm taking your castle, you're taking my castle. What's the reality of this?
Just a second, let me make sure that I have time to answer this, because I have
and this will be the last question. I'm sorry.
No, I got time. I have I'm interviewing Maria Zakharova later on today.
Are you? Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Hopefully it goes well. But but I'm going to answer this in typical Scott Ritter fashion. I mean, I'm going to give you an analogy because it's the only way I can explain this. Normally, when we talk about do they really view this, do they that, you're implying knowledge-based assessments. So let's liken Europe to a university where students come into the classroom and a professor postulates problems, and the students are designed to answer the problems based upon fact and logic and reality. And so you're in a university, and the question is Russia a threat? We used to act like this back in the Cold War, even though that we were diametrically opposed. I was part of that process, and it wasn't, like every Cold War era mentality. Dude, I was part of that, and I'm telling you, the mentality was we were so damn realistic about what the Russians were. We studied it. We went there and visited. We did the whole thing. It was an academic environment of intellectual thought. But what happens over time is the people that run the university didn't like the fact that Scott Ritter was going home, getting a good night's sleep, refreshing himself, maybe reading something else, coming in and bringing that outside thought into the university and going, yes, but Mr. Professor, I'd like to ask the following question. So what they did is they said, Scott, you can't go home. You got to stay on the dormitory. All right, I'll stay on the dormitory. And then they built a wall around the dormitory. And the university stopped being a university, but they called it a university, but it became a concentration camp. And now it's a closed thing. And I'm in there and I'm not getting the outside thing, but, and then gradually they start changing the process that reality has nothing to do it. I'm going insane. I'm no longer I'm insane. I'm in a concentration camp and I'm insane, but I think I'm in a university. So I believe that I'm actually doing this. What Europe has become, and the reason why I brought it up this way is I think back in the 1960s, there was an insane asylum in Elgin, Illinois. And they ran an experiment where they took the staff and they said, okay, we want you to check yourselves in here and act as if you're insane. And they're like, well, this is just play acting. That's no problem. And they did. And then when the experiment ended, they were insane. they convinced themselves they were insane, even though they knew that it wasn't a real insane asylum. It wasn't. Europe has convinced itself that they're an academic institution, but it's really a concentration camp holding an insane asylum. And these people are trapped in. They believe Russia's a threat because the insane asylum has put that out there as the justification for being in this situation that you're in. Why can't we go outside the walls? Russia's a threat. Oh dear. Okay. So when you say, do they believe this? My answer is yes, they do believe it, because they have created a system that doesn't allow that thesis to be challenged. You can't challenge. That's the problem in there. And we're seeing the danger is that that's coming over to America, where we're no longer allowed to challenge things anymore. Because under the Biden administration, if I challenge it, I'm un-American. Well, hell, Trump, Mr. Free Speech, I'm un-American. Mr. President, I got a question about Israel. You're not allowed to say. You're in the insane asylum, Ritter. Israel is good. Israel is good. Hamas is bad. Palestine is bad. We're not. The insane asylum. That's what happens when you stop free thinking, free expression. That's when you stop, having a fact-based world. When you start allowing people to come in and dictate solutions to you, you don't live in a free society anymore. Europe is not a free society. In Germany today, I would be arrested for saying half the things we said here today. Yeah. But they say we're a free society. In France, I would be shut down. In England, I would have cops coming to my door if I dare posted a meme that said, Benjamin Netanyahu had a booger in his nose. Scott, that is anti-Semitic, and we're arresting you. We're putting you in jail for a long period of time. Europe is not a free society. You're not allowed to question anything. It's an insane asylum, a concentration camp, an insane asylum inside where the curators are telling you, oh, don't worry, it's a free society. Don't worry, everything. It's as Orwellian as it gets. Double speak. And that's the reality of Europe. So when you say, do they believe this? Yes, just like an insane person will believe the insanity. And America is becoming that. We have to be very careful not to allow this to happen here in America. We need voices to be shouting out in opposition. Even if we don't agree with them, we have to allow that to happen so that there can be debate, dialogue, discussion, and exchange of ideas in a civil fashion where we're not pulling out guns and shooting each other, where we're sitting and saying, I respect your right to hold your opinion, and you respect my right to hold my opinion. And then we talk it out. And at the end of the discussion, we can still disagree with each other, but we have to reach out and shake hands saying, hey, thanks for allowing us to prove to everybody we don't live in an insane asylum, that we live in an academic institution that encourages this kind of intellectual development. Europe is not that. Europe is a concentration camp with an insane asylum that's posturing as an academic university.
Scott Ritter, the man himself. Scott Ritter is a former UN weapons inspector and weapons of mass destruction whistleblower. Scott, where can people find you, man?
ScottRitter.com. Easiest thing in the world.
Very straightforward. Scott, thank you for this. I always appreciate these conversations. Thank you, man.
Thanks.
You have a good one. Be safe. Bye. All right. The man himself, Scott Ritter. Yeah, he's right. It's just, that's hard. Like, we have a First Amendment for a reason, because that's hard. Like, invariably, something will come up where someone says, yeah, we can have this debate, but what if I lose? And if I lose this debate, XYZ will be the consequences if all of these people take this opposition view. So we need to stop them from taking this opposition view. Nazis is the fascinating thing to me about that conversation. How do you have that conversation with a Nazi? Like, it's that part, right? I suppose you can have that conversation, but yeah, the Nazi thing is always the fascinating thing to be for free speech. Scott Ritter. Shout out to him. Always appreciate him joining me. Always appreciate him coming on. While we have a moment, Margaret Kimberley is going to be joining us. Oh, I love talking to Margaret, so I'm going to enjoy this conversation. But we're going to go to Wandy, USA. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Back at you, Wandy. Wraith, gratitude, Jamal. He's saying gratitude because I sent a shout out to him first thing in the morning before the show started. Shout out to you, Wraith. Thank you very much, my man. I want to thank all of you in the chat for joining us. U.S. Navy Vet, Nova Storm, Alexander G, Raji, no, Bogey, 708, Skeptical Jerk, RGS. Shout out to all of you, Rod, Rat, Charlie G. Thank you all for joining me. Again, I know it's early, and I appreciate you guys for doing so. I have to get to this. I have to get to this. I am fascinated by what has just taken place kind of outside my eye shot. And I had to kind of delve into this morning to figure out what just happened. What I'm referring to is the potential for a government shutdown. Or let me say, that was a potential for a government shutdown. Democrats in the Senate were outraged by the continuing resolution. Oh, this is horrible. They're taking advantage. I can't believe they're doing this. And in doing so, postured themselves as saying, we are not going to accept this. And not just we are not going to accept this, we will shut the government down. We believe in it that much that we will shut the government down. We want a 1-month continuing resolution to work out some kind of bipartisan agreement. Democrats held very little cards in this. Yes, you have the capability of shutting the government down, but keep in mind, Republicans do that often. Democrats are reluctant to do that because all things being equal, their ethos is that government works. So how are you the party that government works and yet you shut it down? And what does it look like? Who gets blamed? All of these things are, undefinable consequences to a particular piece of action that you and your party may take. Now the catch becomes, how much do you believe in it? And are you willing to do it? And once you do it, can you, let's say, muster the political will to say that the opposition, it's their fault that the government is being shut down? If you don't know those things, do you go through that course? Schumer relented and completely capitulated. And I mean capitulated where his back breaks and the top part of his body falls onto his ass and his legs curl up and his body curls into it. That's how much they caved and capitulated. And the Democratic Party at this point is a complete outrage. Even so much so where apparently House Democrats are threatening to raid the Senate floor in protest because they are so angry at Chuck Schumer. Bernie Sanders was out there saying, shut it down. Shut it down. AOC, shut it down. Schumer, we can't do this because this is not the right course to go. And so then the other question is, okay, so why walk the plank? Why go that far where you are effectively saying, we're going to shut it down, we're going to shut it down, if only to back away from that hot fire the moment that you need it to touch the hot stove? It is weird. It is strange. They got nothing out of it. They were going to get nothing out of it. And the Republican position was piss or get off the pot. If you're going to do it. We're going to watch you do it. We want to see this. In which case, Schumer relented. I want to bring up my guest because I want to have this conversation with her. And she's here a little early, which is fantastic. We are joined with the woman herself, Margaret Kimberley. Margaret Kimberley is senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report and author of Presidential, Black America, and the Presidents. Welcome to the show. How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm good. Thank you. Good to be back.
Oh, it is always good to have you. I want to show two clips. The first clip is Thune, Majority Leader in the Senate. And Thune comes out after the threats that were coming out of Democrats that they were going to shut the government down. And Thune says this. He says this. I'm fascinated by this. We'll talk about it. I'm fascinated by this. This is Thune basically saying, look, if you're going to do this,
Mr. President, as the expression goes, it's time for Democrats to fish or cut bait. We have 2 days until government funding expires. Democrats need to decide if they're going to support funding legislation that came over from the House or if they're going to shut down the government.
You need to make a choice on what you're going to do. This is not up to us. This is on you. Either you shut it down or you pass the resolution. All right. Now, many Democrats were screaming, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. We're not going to accept this. Chuck Schumer was one of those people screaming, we're going to accept this. And if we need to shut the government down, we'll do it. 2 days before the government actually shuts down, Schumer comes out and says, to the ire of every Democrat in the House, comes out and says this.
This week, Democrats offered a sensible way out. Fund the government for another month to give appropriators more time to do their jobs. Republicans rejected this proposal outright. Why did they reject it? Because Donald Trump doesn't want the appropriators to do their job. He wants full control over government spending. He isn't the first president who wants this, but he's the first president to cower his party into submission, so that Republican rejection leads us to a decision. That Republican rejection leads us to a decision. And it's not really a decision, it's a Hobson's choice. Either proceed with the bill before us or risk Donald Trump throwing America into the chaos of a shutdown. This, in my view, is no choice at all. While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse. For sure, the Republican bill is a terrible option. It is not a clean CR. It is deeply partisan. It doesn't address far too many of this country's needs.
That's going far too long. Effectively, as you noted, as he pointed out, passing this is bad, shutdown is worse. And this is 3 minutes of him capitulating and explaining why he is capitulating in this overt way. This is astonishing. The notion that you would take your party out on a ledge like this, where we're in it for the fight, we're in it for the fight, we're going to shut it down. Damn, we're going to shut it down. We're not going to accept this. And then 2 minutes to midnight, okay, I know he said we're going to shut it down. But we've decided that it is worse to shut it down. So everything that we said before, forget that. We're now going to pass this continuing resolution, in which case they're going to come out. Schumer is going to marshal his powers in order to pass this bill for the continuing resolution. That's astonishing. Like, A, they got nothing out of it.
Well,
B, it's curious whether they were going to get anything out of it ever. And yet
right.
Schumer took his party out this far only to back away and back off the ledge. Democrats in the House are pissed. They are pissed. Give me your take on this.
Well, I'm not surprised at all. Schumer's a company guy. He's a centrist. He's not the kind of person with the guts to do this. I mean, that would be a gutsy thing to be the one to shut the government down. In ordinary circumstances, most people do not like government shutdowns. Mm-hmm. And it hurt Newt Gingrich back in the 90s. It hurt Trump during his first term. So it's a difficult choice. I think it would have been appropriate because, we keep hearing that Trump is a fascist. He's an existential threat. He's Hitler's cousin. He's this, he's that. Well, if he's all of those things, you have to do something radical to fight him. But Democrats are not fighters. If they're out, they go along to get along and they cut deals, and they know if there's a Republican president and they're in the minority, they're not going to get much, but they go along. I mean, essentially, rhetorically, they may claim they're fighting for the people or whatever. So this is not, they don't know what to do. They literally do not know what to do because Trump is not playing that game. He's like, it's my way or the highway. I want to run everything. I'm firing federal workers without a spending bill. I'm letting some, rich guy hang out in the Oval Office and come to cabinet meetings and tell me what to do. He is dispensing with the old system. He's getting rid of it. So there's no way to fight it. I mean, it is a difficult fight, but you have to think, I hate to use the term outside the box, but I guess that does fit. So to say we're going to go along with the guy who's a fascist, who's Hitlerite, then then you're complicit too. And everybody wants to make this Hitler analogy. I say, well, one of the things that helped Hitler was that there was a weak liberal class, so he didn't really have any opposition. So you want to talk about Hitler? Let's talk about that.
Weak liberal class. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
Yeah. So we have liberals who we have people. They don't even fight other Democrats. Remember when Biden was in and they all caved? All the progressives, quote unquote, the squad, everybody caved to him. So they won't fight when it's an easier thing to do. So we're pretty much screwed. And we have to look outside of the electoral system because they are not going to save us from this.
You know, what's wild about this is a part of Schumer's reasoning for doing this and going out on a ledge like this, again, only to capitulate. That it's that part that blows my mind, that it's a bluff. It was only a bluff, but the bluff came out of effectively Democrats screaming at Democrats to do something. Like you have all of these liberal groups that apparently Hakeem Jeffries are bugging the hell out of him. And effectively saying, they're firing all of these workers. They're getting rid of all of these people. They're destroying these agencies. What are you doing to stop it? It was that. And that line of rhetoric coming out of, let's say, liberal groups push Democrats to effectively say, we are going to be a hedge against Donald Trump's agenda in the context of this continuing resolution. Okay, fair enough. But what Chuck Schumer also knew, and what they were having conversations behind the scenes about, according to the articles in Axios and Punchbowl, was they knew they were going to capitulate. Meaning, when they're talking to each other, they're like, we don't have any cards. We can't do this. We can't shut it down. We know at some point we're going to have to capitulate. And yet, the rhetoric that kept coming out of them was, we're going to stand strong. We're going to stop Trump. We're going to prevent this agenda. And again, it's not that they're wrong about the agenda. I want people to realize that they have been firing federal workers. They have been going after federal agents, basically preventing them from being able to function in a normal capacity. And the continuing resolution, yeah, it cuts stuff, but it cuts stuff in a way Republicans would typically cut stuff. It's not like it's some kind of magical thing. It's a Republican in office, and they cut stuff according to the things that are not their priorities. That's not shocking. Any random Republican that goes into office would do that. But they are doing that. The continuing resolution, a lot of that stuff is so vague that it allows Trump more leeway in order to move money around into things that he wants versus things that he don't want. That's their issue. That's their main complaint in regards to the continuing resolution. I guess my thing is, you hyped all of these people up as if you were going to shut the government down when you knew behind the scenes it never was going to happen. You were never going to do it. And you were telling each other that it wasn't going to happen. How is this a benefit to the party? That's the part I don't get. I would have a little more respect for him if he'd said all along, I'm not doing that. You know me, yes. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to shut down the government. And to make public statements implying that he might, leading his caucus to think that he would, it was respectful of, but that's the Democratic Party. They're also worried about their oligarchs. You know, everybody, Bernie Sanders is running around talking about Republican oligarchs like the Democrats don't have them. Those people are also whispered in Chuck Schumer's ear. You'd better not. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of those people have stopped giving money. They're so angry about Kamala Harris losing, raising $1 billion, and then she lost. They were like, we're out. Y'all better figure this out. So, but I'm sure that doesn't end, that momentary anger. So Schumer's taking the long view. What about our funders? What are they going to, because that's who they represent. They don't represent us. And I think that's another reason for how this turned out. Oh, that is such a good point. Punchbowl News points out, and I love this article. It's so brutal. It's not normally just brutal. It's brutal. It says, during this whole fight, Democrats never managed to put Mike Johnson and Senator Majority Leader John Thune and Trump in a tough spot. There are plenty of policies House Democrats could have asked for in the continuing resolution, more money for certain programs, for instance, that would have placed Republicans in a bind. But they never made the case for anything like that. Meaning it's like you had a policy fight without picking any policy that you're fighting over. You're just fighting over the entirety of the continuing resolution that nobody knows what's in it. Like, meaning, if you're talking to a random person on the street, nobody knows what's in the continuing resolution. The only thing they know is Republicans are pushing a continuing resolution, Democrats don't like it. And so it's not like you're going out and making them look bad for doing this. You are just saying, this sucks. We don't like it. We want to stop it. And their point is, okay, that got you nowhere. That gets you nowhere. Nobody cares because nobody had anything specific where they can point to and say, okay, that's a big deal that you shouldn't be able to get rid of, in which case Republicans are on the spot for doing so. Democrats didn't even do that. Like, this is fascinating to me. They are, God, man, they're missing the boat. Like, I don't know how you can
but
do
that's
this
what
bad.
they do. That's who they are. They don't, they can't even figure out a way to articulate what's wrong with what Trump is doing. That Congress created the Department of Education, that Congress created USID, and they can't be dismantled without congressional approval. At least put the Republicans on the spot. I suspect a lot of Republicans are uneasy by these very radical moves by Trump and Musk, but they're going along because he's their president. And I don't know if it's still true, but there are people like him. And so, Democrats can't even articulate what the problem is. And there you go. You have a stock market
Collapsing.
I mean, that's something that nobody likes. That everybody knows there's something wrong with that. You have a pension. There's a stock portfolio in your pension, or you're retired. Your 401k. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
But all these obvious things that they can't even express, don't even come up with a new narrative. They cannot believe what they're witnessing, and they literally have no idea what to do, because what they do is represent other people. They represent big pharma and the banks and, APAC and this one and that one. And I'm not concerned about us. Did you notice there's absolute consensus on allowing Israel to continue its genocide in Gaza?
Yeah.
They made a big fuss about Ukraine, which was, phony. But there's no difference at all between the two parties. And it's that kind of things. They're always colluding. That was a big word in the first Trump administration. There's absolute collusion. And this is where we see it. People talk about fighting back, but see what they did last week during Trump's speech to Congress, the not State of the Union speech, which really was a State of the Union speech. I'm not sure what you call it, but anyway. And Congressman Al Green, all he did was stand up and shake his fist and shake his cane and yell something, and Democrats join in the censoring. And I'm like, what are you doing? But they, if he's Hitler, somebody should at the very least be standing up and shaking their cane at him, right? So we see how phony they are. Phony to us, to the people, and how their role is not to do what we want them to do. So when somebody comes along with the hatchet, with the buzzsaw, as Elon Musk does, and says, I'm going to have huge cuts to Medicaid, and people are worrying even about their Social Security. This is a moment to show something new, but they don't have anything new. They don't have anything.
Should. Yeah. I mean, if you contact Social Security, you would hear waiting times have increased by several months because of cuts to Social Security. Basically, because of the number of people that have been fired. We are no longer capable of doing this stuff in a timely fashion, so your times are extended. Okay, well, that's not good. Like, if you're 65, you don't want to hear that. If you are disabled, you don't want to hear that. And yet, there it is, because of the things that are effectively being done to those organizations. Why do you think, a political party is pointless if it can't win. And the notion that you're losing to somebody like Trump, somebody who literally tried to overthrow the government of the United States, got 1 million people killed during COVID. And yes, my audience disagrees with me on COVID. I don't care. They're wrong. 1 million people killed during COVID. Like, you as a political party if nothing else, meaning the context to which you run it, we need to get elected. And we need to create a coalition in order to get elected. How, like, I don't understand how you have an election where you lose the working class and there is no come to Jesus moment in it at all. It is purely still reflexive and reactive to Trump. It's not like some political coalition came together and said, you know what, we got this wrong. 3 a.m. between our God, we had a moment, and we are now organizing ourselves. Even if you're working in the context of the rich, you still need to get elected. What are they missing? Because they are, like, as a party, worthless. Like, meaning in order to get anything done as a political party, they are a worthless entity. What do you think they're missing? Or maybe I'm missing something in regards to what I think political parties are
it's funny you
supposed to do.
should say that, because I and others have argued they're not really a political party anymore. They're like a money laundering operation. With all these this veneer of democracy and government and a political party, they're a money laundering operation for rich people. They do believe there's some basics of the welfare state that they support, Social Security, Medicaid, etc. But they are not here. What do they do when anybody expresses like a progressive, slightly progressive thought? They get hammered down. Their goal is to, I was reading that, Rahm Emanuel wants to run for president. That was his whole political thing, was beating up on anybody a tiny bit to the left. So that's what the Democrats are. We have a far right party and a center right party, and I'm not even so sure how center they are anymore. So what you expect, the questions you ask, doesn't a political party do this or do that? Well, they're not really a political party. And James Carville, I don't know why he's still, giving his 2 cents worth of opinion, but he said, well, there's nothing for us to do. We don't have anything to do. Trump is going to unravel. And they're just waiting to the midterms next year. That's their whole plan, is not to, they're hoping that these, many of these lawsuits obstruct Trump a little bit, and then they'll wait for the midterms. That's their whole plan, is to wait for the midterms. What you should be doing, if the Republicans say we have to cancel town halls, because their people are saying, wait a minute, I didn't think you meant me, which I think is kind of funny. I don't really have sympathy for these Republicans who say, I didn't vote for this. Yes, you did. But anyway, they had an expectation of other people being hurt, not that it was you're a farmer and you don't get your money from the USDA and you're about to go under. But so if they cancel town halls, what should Democrats be doing? Holding town halls. You don't need a visa to hold a town hall. Do it yourself. Well, since the president says you can't have a town hall, here we are. Here I am, Chuck Schumer, and I'm going to have a town hall in, red state Podunkville. That's what you would do if you were a real political party. But that's not what they are. And so, I think they're hoping that these lawsuits can stop Trump and that they just wait around till next November and they get a majority, at least in the House. The Republican majority varies. It's by 2 or 3 votes, something like that, very small.
Very small.
And hoping that they can at least win one House so they can cut deals some more. Not actually so they can stop any of this or even articulate what is wrong with this, why it is wrong for, Elon Musk is flying around on Marine One, the president's I thought it was the president's helicopter. Why is he on Marine One if Trump was on and he was his guest, all right, but it's like an Uber service for this man. Yeah. And whose goal is to tear up government. He said so. That's his goal. They want to operate government as little as possible. They're not touching the defense budget. Have you noticed that? Use AI
billions.
Yes, to replace people. So who cares if? Do you remember when Social Security used to be called the third rail of politics because you couldn't touch it? Not anymore. You can touch anything. So to have this party with so little imagination, but they're not fighters. They're not fighters. They are company people. They are part of the system. They want to be part of the government, permanent government. And if they need to fight for us, the answer is no. They helped Joe Biden lie to us. Remember when Biden first came in, I'm going to cut child poverty in half. I knew that was BS. I knew that wasn't happening. They wouldn't even call him on it. So
no, they wouldn't fight him on it. I mean, like, to be fair, I approve of that policy. It was effectively Social Security for kids. Because to me, it's like,
it would have been good.
Yeah, it would have been great. They did it for 8 months, and then they lost the vote in the Senate because of Christian Cinema and Joe Manchin. This is deeply frustrating to me.
Well, it's one of the reasons it's something that's not mentioned very often. I think it's the biggest reason Kamala Harris lost. I think it's the biggest reason that Biden's approval ratings were so anemic. If I have said jokingly, if people still had their child tax credit, nobody would have cared that Biden was senile. People would have said, he's looking a little senile, but whatever, I'll still vote for him. He wouldn't have even had to drop out.
Agreed. And look, if you're telling somebody a $400 check is going to be in your box every month, that's money in your pocket. Do you vote for somebody who's going to take that away? No. You don't. Right.
It's one month you have it, the next month you don't. The people who were kicked off of Medicaid, the unwinding, as they called it, where they during COVID relaxed the eligibility rules, and there were more people on Medicaid and more people on SNAP. They just kicked them off, and I think that was their margin of defeat, frankly.
And by the way, this happened just before the election.
Yes, it all happened in early 2024.
Yeah.
So, you didn't hear, there were all kinds of explanations, complicated explanations that didn't make sense to most people. I thought you had the majority in the Senate, then they lost in the midterms. But this is a party living on its reputation as the party of the people. What did they say? Most progressive president since FDR. I knew that was nonsense. They didn't even talk about LBJ. I was like, that's why we have Medicare and Medicaid. And but at any rate, so they sold themselves that way. And the thing that's so insidious about that to me, that means they know what people want.
Yes.
They know what people want. And now you have a president determined to take all that away, all the things that they said were so important, that they said they were going to die on that hill. And there they are dying. They didn't even get on the hill. Much less die on
and then from my point of view, this is just typical Republican stuff. Like, this is their ethos. We do not believe in a government in general like this. I mean, maybe a tepid government, but not a government, like a full-throated Great Society government. Okay, fair enough. You're supposed to have another party that does believe in this Great Society, quote unquote, government, and they don't either. And when you get something tepid like, okay, we believe the kids are the future, and how those kids grow up is going to be a reflection of what those kids end up like. So we want to make sure that they have food, clothing, shelter. And the way we're going to do this is by giving $300, $400 to parents with kids. That would have been it's hard to get across how much help that would have been growing up. And so this is one of those things I'm like, yeah, this is a good idea. You're putting money into people's pockets. That's what you should be doing anyway. I mean, how do you show that you are getting something accomplished in the sense of government that people can be aware of? I know there's a check. There's a check. Joe Biden could have even signed it. Signed by Joe Biden. You're welcome. That's how you do it, right? You have all of these people who still remember when Donald Trump gave them that check for COVID, which was, again, at the time, mind-blowing because the government usually doesn't give people anything in that sense. And so it's good policy. It's good public planning. And it is good optics. And they killed it. And you're absolutely right. God, man, this is frustrating. Because what they're going to do is what you pointed out. It's what Nancy Pelosi said. At some point, they'll come back to us. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to change. We don't have to make any updates. We can point and say, hey, It looks like they're destroying Social Security. That's bad. Okay, that says nothing about you. That's you pointing at something bad. That's different, right? That is what they're going to do. And I'm glad you brought up Joe Biden. I saw this and I was like, okay, fair enough. Reality is what we thought reality was. Apparently, according to The Hill, and I just read it, the day before the debate, or the day of the debate, Biden called to give Harris an unusual kind of pep talk and another reminder about loyalty. He demanded. No longer able to defend his own record, he expected Harris to protect his legacy. Whether she won or lost the election, he thought she would only harm him by publicly distancing herself from him, especially during a debate that would be watched by millions of Americans. To the extent that she wanted to forge her own path, Biden had no interest in giving her any room to do so. He needed just 3 words to convey how much all that mattered to him. No daylight, kid, Biden said. No daylight, kid. No daylight between us. It's you will go and you will defend the Biden legacy. Whether you win or lose the election, you will defend my legacy. Go out there and do it. No daylight, kid. Oh, that is mind-blowing. That is mind-blowing. That means Biden was like, look, man, I am on my last leg. I am going to be off this physical matter reality plane of existence in a few years. Defend my legacy. I don't care if you win or lose. It's not going to have an effect on me one way or the other. Defend my legacy. No daylight, kid. And I love the kid at the end. Oh, I love the kid at the end. It's intimate in a weird way.
It's very Biden-esque. It's very Biden-esque.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
but there's intimacy to it. Like there's a
it's like your friends. It's like, you know, I have friends who are older than me who called me kid.
Yes,
because they're you know, in their 70s. I'm in my 60s. They're in their 70s, and they call me kid. You know, it's like your buddies, chums, you know, sister, but something.
It's deeply manipulative. It's also deeply manipulative.
Oh, it's coming from him.
Yes, there's a level of intimacy associated with it. But that intimacy, on some level, is like, look, I know you're running in an election. I know it's the presidential election, meaning the grand stage. I don't care if you win it or lose it. We're buddies. We're friends. I'm your
It's all about me.
It's all about me.
That's what he was saying. And this is why I have I was never a Biden fan, ever. But the fact Trump is president because of him. If the Democrat, you know, the funny thing, I always thought these people were very cutthroat, the Nancy Pelosi, and she's one of the people who led the coup, she and Obama and others. I figured they were going to push him out. And so month after month, I kept saying they can't keep Biden. They can't keep him. And I remember a year to the day before Election Day, David Axelrod had this tweet showing Biden's approval ratings or lack of approval rating and saying, you know, maybe he should think about what's best for the country. But he didn't. He was thinking about himself. Grandpa wouldn't give up the keys. And then, of course, and they let him, and all these people who decided, the funders who decided to push him out in June or July, who didn't do it the year before when they could have, he could have been golden. If Biden had said, what did he say? He said something when he implied he'd be a one-term president. I'm a transitional. I can't remember.
Transitional, right?
Transitional. If he had really stuck with that and stepped down and had a primary so that the Democratic voters could choose who they wanted, the likelihood is they would have had a better chance to beat Trump. But he had to be dragged out kicking and screaming. And then they, give it to word salad lady at, try to shoehorn her in at the last minute. But and I don't know if this new book reveals he's the one who undercut the whole process. They were going to have some pretend open convention or something to give an impression that delegates had a choice, and he undermined everybody by endorsing Kamala Harris. Do you remember Obama didn't endorse her right away? It took him a couple of days. Yep. That's because Biden threw a wrench into the plan. So he's just a loathsome person. He didn't even care about his party. He cared about him. And the other thing that astounds me is there's a coup. He's gone. They got rid of him. Why are you listening to him?
Yeah, that's the other part, right? Like it's one thing. I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, it's like I remember she was it Stephen Colbert? It was a friendly interview. And he asked, so how are you different from Joe Biden? And she just looked, she had that deer in the headlights look she could get. And then she said, well, I'm not Donald Trump. And that sort of explains her, aside from her, sometimes her inability to express herself. I think she was feeling that pressure too. But this just astounds me that, she would go along with what he said, that they didn't come up with a way. I mean, it was awkward. You don't want to stab him in the back, but you have to find a way to express how you're going to be different. Are you just Joe Biden in a dress, or, is there something different about you?
That's what it came across.
Yes, Joe Biden in a dress. That explains a lot, but people should be she and Joe Biden should not be able to show their faces in public without getting hit by a rotten tomato. I'm sorry. That's why Trump is president now. But people, are still hesitant to talk about, well, we just have to focus on Trump. It's like, well, how did we end up here? Don't you want to avoid ending up like this again? But anyway.
I think you're right. And I think people need to kind of, they need to let that sink in. They said that the man was Hitler. They say he was a fascist. They said we never have another election. They say he was going to shoot Liz Cheney in the face. They said all of this hysterical stuff. And simultaneously, look, you can't deviate from me. Even if Hitler wins, even if the fascists is going to shoot Liz Cheney in the face and get rid of all the media and all of the elections, and this is no longer going to be America because it's going to be Trump world. Even if that is the result, you can't deviate from me, kid. No daylight. Oh, that statement, no daylight, kid. I love it. I don't like what it means. I just love the statement. It's
hilarious.
It's hilarious. It's 3 words. No daylight, kid.
And I want to say something else about Biden. Is it my imagination, or did he and Obama not speak at Carter's funeral or the inauguration?
From my understanding, I didn't see him speak. From my understanding, the reporting was that there was deep animosity between Joe Biden, in regards to what took place. They had feelings about Nancy Pelosi kicking them out. And what's wild about that, how does Joe Biden watch the debate that he was in and come away with the assessment, I can still beat him? How does he do that? That's astonishing to me. That is a level of just willful self-blindness and delusion, every bit as much as Trump saying, I won the election. It's astonishing.
Yes. It's delusion. That's the same word I was going to use. But this is a person who Obama once said about him, he's not very self-aware. That's a nice way of talking about Biden. He's not, to insist that he was okay but see, this is what the Democrats did in 2020. They decided to rig it for Biden. They wanted to get rid of Bernie. What did they tell us when we saw that Biden was in decline then? He has a stutter. It's just a stutter. And I said, that's a lie. All these years, I don't remember Biden having a stutter. Now he's got a stutter. I'm like, this is not. So they let this man become president, and with no plan to make sure he was only a one-termer, because I think there was some luck involved in him winning at all in 2020. So they don't do anything. They hope they can convince him to leave, but he's Joe Biden. He's not going anywhere. Nobody wants to give up power. So, he doesn't want to go. People, they don't know what to do. They can beat up on everybody else. They can beat up on progressives and steal nominations from Bernie Sanders. But Joe Biden, they didn't know what to do. And he's taken down the whole ship is sinking because of him. So all that to say, why are we surprised that they won't stand up to Trump?
That's so God, astonishing, man.
But that story cracked me up. No daylight, kid.
That story tripped me out.
Listen, if it had been me, I would have said, why, yes, Joe, of course. And then I would have said whatever the hell I wanted.
Because you need to win. The entire point is to win. The entire point is not, okay, I need to win in the context of making him feel good about himself. Okay, that's not it. That's not the rule. That's not the way it works. Like, it is a blood sport. Obama put a knife in Hillary Clinton in that race. Like, he had no issue about it at all. She was supposed to be the heir apparent. He didn't care. That's how you win races. And the notion that she is tethered to him and to policies that the American public fundamentally just didn't like, it's just amazing to me. One interesting thing that is popping up, Nate Silver is pointing out that Donald Trump's approval rating is dropping and is in serious decline over the things that Trump is doing. And you pointed out yourself, many people say, well, I didn't vote for him to do this. It's like, okay, well, what do you think? He's a Republican. He's going to do Republican stuff. When they said they wanted to get rid of the Department of Education, why did you think it was a joke? So Silver points out, this is getting reasonably fast decline. We launched this last week. Trump's approval rating is plus 0.5. It is now negative 0.17. It is declining. It is dropping like a rock. They released this last week, watching the calamity coming out of the White House. Oh, we're doing the tariff war. Oh, we're going after this country. Oh, we're going after that country. Everybody is taking advantage of America. And apparently the American public is like, okay, you're destroying these agencies that you know nothing about. If you believe that Elon Musk understands the inner workings of any of these agencies, you're out of your mind. He is a Johnny-come-lately looking at a very complex bureaucracy and is just taking a sledgehammer to the bureaucracy. Public doesn't like that. I will wager to you they don't like that. Even Republicans will probably have issues with that. Oh, we're going to try to destroy the Department of Education. Okay, well, it sounds like we need a Department of Education. You guys on the campaign trail said that Americans were too stupid to do many of these jobs, so they have to import them from overseas. And now you're simultaneously trying to take apart the Department of Education. I agree that there are issues with it in regards to, let's say, outcomes. But destroying it, it doesn't seem to be the way to deal with that situation.
You know, it's funny to me. Some of these were talking points among the right for years. We shouldn't have, because it used to be, remember, I think it was under Carter, it was HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare. And they spun off education into its own agency, and conservatives, you know, for all these decades have been saying they don't like the Department of Education. But we can see also that a lot of them didn't really mean that, because they never did it. Even when there were Republicans in office and they had majorities in Congress, they never got rid of the Department of Education. What they want to do is get rid of regulations. They want to give money to states, no strings attached. If states want to discriminate, not provide bilingual education, not provide special education, they don't care. So that's the right-wing dream, is to have money without strings attached at all. So that's their goal. But that's still, that is a very dangerous thing, you know, get rid of wokeness and all that stuff. But we see how they didn't really mean it. There was a part of the far right of the Republican Party who did, and now they're in. So all these things Republicans would say, they didn't really mean. So they're also going along. They're scared of Trump. But you know, he can be unpopular and still have the power to do all these things.
He's president.
And Schumer and others are just hoping, assuming they'll do well in the midterms and somehow stop him. But even then, you would have to shut down the government, wouldn't you? Let's say Democrats win the House and the Senate in November of 2026. And Trump proposes a budget and they say no, you'd still have to shut the government down.
Yeah. At the end of the day, yeah. Or make a deal. One or the other. You don't get posed. Yeah. Do you think there's going to be a backlash to all of this? I mean, because my thought is
against Trump.
Yeah. I mean, and Republicans who are going along with it. I mean, if you destroy Social Security, destroy the Department of Education, even if you do it in a de facto sense where it just doesn't work well, will the public feel some kind of way about it, Republicans included, that they have, because my thing is, they voted for Trump with the idea of, okay, this is a businessman. He's going to fix the economy. He's going to do some culture war stuff. Fair enough. Okay, we'll accept the culture war stuff. We may not like it. We may like it, whatever. But the economy is going to be ticking well. And then his first thing is, I'm going to have a tariff war against Mexico, Canada, China, Europe. I'm going to do all that at once, simultaneously. And then the economy starts ticking down. And they say, hey, is there going to be a recession? Maybe, but don't worry. It's going to work out. And I remember when Boris Johnson was doing this shuck and jive over in the UK with Brexit. Oh, it's going to be great. We're going to be Fortress Britain. We're going to make deals with everybody. It's going to be fantastic. And then at a private gathering, he's like, this is going to hurt. He's like, this is going to hurt. This is going to be painful. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. I know he's trying to do.
And he does not understand anything. I don't know what he understands other than self-promotion. And he's not a successful businessman. How many times did he go bankrupt? Every time he couldn't pay his bills, he'd file 5 or 6 times. He was bankrupt. But people delude themselves too, because they believed in the rest, the white nationalism. They believed in that. And he was going to build a wall, get rid of immigrants, end wokeness, disappear Black people from public life. They were in favor. They did not think that they were going to leave the government job they'd had for 30 years.
Right.
They didn't think it's like, oh, you meant me? You meant me?
What?
So yes, he is going to be increasingly unpopular, but that alone isn't going to stop him. You can be unpopular and still have the proud powers of the presidency. So yes, he is going to be unpopular, but so what? So what?
Yeah. This has been what, 2 months?
Yeah,
It's been 2 months.
I said it feels like 10 years or something, but
it feels like it's been a long time. I mean, but look, I will be honest with you. I want a bit of chaos because I think this stuff needs to change, and I don't know how it changes.
It's like, but I'm always nervous about that because this country, people can be so nutty. It's like, are people going to rise up to save their Social Security? I mean, nature abhors a vacuum. Somebody's going to rise up. Who is that going to be? Is it going to be the far right? Is it who will it be?
Like that is the establishment's argument, right? Like, hey, we are a finger in the wall, and I know you may not like us. They're worse, so you got to keep us in. And my thing is that model has to be broken. I
think it is broken. People are saying, "What are you? You're not even saying anything." I mean, it's not even a rhetorical challenge. I mean nothing at this very crucial moment. So, yeah, the chaos or the dialectics, could work out okay for us, but who knows? We don't know. And he's, everybody, of course, Democrats attack, and when they do attack him from the right. So when that crazy, shouting match with Zelensky and everything, they were like, he's cozying up to Russia. He's, not. I was like, no. So they did not bring up the point that everybody should be concerned with. He wants to normalize relations with Russia in order to target China.
Yes.
And that's very dangerous. But that's something that's never mentioned because Democrats also want to target.
That's what I was going to say. That's also Democratic policy. Like that's the wild part, right? On Gaza, same policy.
Yes.
On China, same policy. Obama was doing the Asia pivot. I mean, hell, he was trying to get the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Hillary Clinton had gotten in a position where it was so hated that she was like, I'm going to change the name. And Obama was like, I don't care what the public wants. We're going to do this. And she's like trying to get away from it as much as she can. It's both of their policies. Margaret, you are fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want one more thing. I just want to remind folks to buy my book.
Presidential. I was going to call it Margaret Kimberley. She's a senior columnist and editor at Black Agenda Report and author of Presidential, Black America and the Presidents. Get her book. It is going to be fantastic. Margaret, where can people find you, by the way?
blackagendareport.com. And I'm on X, Twitter. My handle is Freedom Ride Blog.
Thank you for this. You have a fantastic day. Thank you.
You too. All right. Bye-bye.
This was a great interview. I always enjoy talking to Margaret. So these are always special conversations I enjoy. I'll put it that way. But we will see how this plans out. Trump has been hyperactive as a president. And I'll be honest with you. I'm fine with a hyperactive president. It just depends upon what they do, right? You don't want somebody to be hyperactive digging a ditch. You want somebody to be hyperactive on your own priorities. There's only really one, maybe two priorities that I want. And I'm expecting miserableness coming out of Trump for the rest. One is I want him to end the war. And as we pointed out in the conversations, the Democrats have effectively the same policy as Trump on China, on Israel. So those are not priorities that are going to get settled. Maybe China. I mean, there's conversation that Donald Trump wants to have a conversation with Xi Jinping, that he wants to either travel there or at the very least talk to him in regards to dealing with, I guess, the trade, the tariff war in this case. I don't get the sense that he wants a war tariff-wise with China. That's not the sense I get, despite the fact that he's surrounded people with lunatics, surrounding himself with lunatics. I get the sense he wants a deal. Now, the catch becomes, what is that deal? What does he want from Xi Jinping? That is a fascinating question for me. Xi Jinping is not going to allow Trump to cage, box in, or in any way inhibits China's growth. So whatever that deal is, it's not going to include any of those items. It is going to be something Trump to raise up a save face saying, hey, this is what I got out of the deal, with some kind of relationship with China moving forward. Now, if he finds a way to normalize relations with China with an Asia pivot, it's not this military-esque thing, and he ends the war, those big priorities, those are good priorities. Now, the catch becomes, it's Trump. Who the hell knows what's on his mind? Who the hell knows what he's thinking? And who the hell knows what he does when he doesn't get what he wants? Open questions. We have 3 years, 4 more years, I guess 3.5 more years. Buckle up. Buckle up. There is something that is coming out that is very personal to me. And part of the reason that I really was on board for RFK taking over Health and Human Services. We have a Health and Human Services in this country, and yet people die like 10 years younger than they do in Europe. I would tell you, when you're in Europe, food tastes better. Kind of. It depends on where you are. But it tends to be healthier in a way that is weird to me, that Americans don't seem to care about. It's very strange. When my ex was here in the States, she was looking on item by item by item to see what was in the food, because her thing was, you guys tend to be overweight, you guys tend to die sooner, and there's food items that you put in your products that are illegal to put in our products in Europe. Meaning there are things in our foods that in Europe they consider to be cancerous. And I'm saying in Europe they consider to be cancerous. I would imagine if you consider to be cancerous in one place, it's cancerous, especially if your scientists are effectively defined it and investigated as such. Okay, we have no such issue. Many of those things are currently in our foods. And when you're looking at kids, how the kids grow, the body is a complicated device. The things that you put in it matter. And those things matter, especially over the course of time, if you continuously put it in your system. It will produce illness. And the issue becomes, okay, well, you guys are saying this stuff is safe. This stuff is in the food of children, in the food of babies. We feed it to our kids. We eat it ourselves. And we do this over the course of a life. And then you get cancer. Or then you get some kind of other disease, maybe a childhood disease. And you think, this is just dumb luck. This was pick up the litter. I rolled the dice with life, and I just so happened to have crapped out. As opposed to, was it something that I consumed? Was it something that I drank? Was it something that I breathed in that created the illness condition and the physical system? We don't ask that. We just assume God got involved. God wants me to be ill, and that's life. Okay, well, maybe that's not life. Maybe you were consuming something that you shouldn't have been consuming. Maybe you were inhaling something that you weren't supposed to be inhaling. And I'm not talking about pot. I'm not talking about the vape. Those are things that you effectively roll the dice on. I'm talking about what our government, for whatever reason, considers to be okay, and what corporations are allowed to put in various foods that may have negative, adverse consequence effects on a person, on a child, or as a person as they go into adulthood. And because the person lived their entire life healthy, they don't see what it was that caused the illness. They just know that they're ill. I'm saying, how do you have a healthy human services that seems to be asleep at the wheel? And for RFK, this being the thing that he wanted, I guess two things. One, the JFK files release. But two, I want to deal with issues of food. I want to deal with issues of childhood illnesses. I don't think these kids should be getting sick like this. I want to see if we can fix it. As someone with a childhood illness, too, in fact, Osgood-Schlatter's disease, when I was a kid, it's effectively, it was described as you're growing too fast for your body, effectively, which causes pain in the knees, constant, brutal pain from like 8 years old up until 17. And then at 17, being diagnosed with kidney failure. Okay, that sucks. Is it random? Did God get involved? Or did we have a society that let corporations do whatever the hell they wanted, put whatever they wanted into foods in a way where the government is asleep at the wheel? That is producing negative outcomes, whether it's autism, whether it's, I don't know, pick your illness. Is that what we're dealing with? Okay, well, I don't know. And RFK has said, like, I don't know either. But however, I want to be at the helm of an organization that can investigate, that can check, and that can, on some level, try to change those adverse conditions. This is why I was for RFK. I was for it for personal reasons. So RFK comes out with a video. And this is what he says in this video. And I approve of every word. Okay, I can't say it. I approve of his intent. I'll say it that way. This is Health and Human Services, a new one coming out with RFK.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'm the Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services. In the final months of the election, President Trump repeatedly called for removing toxins from our food supply. He added his voice to the millions of Maha moms who were touting the Make America Healthy Again agenda. The first step is radical transparency, because right now, not even the US government knows what's in our food. In 1958, the government created a designation called Generally Recognized as Safe, or GRAS, so that we can make common ingredients like salt and baking soda exempt from testing. But today, it isn't just salt and baking soda. Food companies and cooperative regulators have enlarged the GRAS exemption so that these companies can decide for themselves whether a substance is generally recognized as safe. No FDA approval is needed. European nations, on the other hand, require that a chemical be proven safe before it becomes a food ingredient. In our country, the GRAS standard means that every chemical is presumed safe until proven dangerous, and that proof might not happen until millions of Americans are sick with chronic disease. This mass experiment on the American population with GRAS has, in short, been a catastrophe. We now have around 10,000 chemicals in our food, while Europe has only 400. For example, titanium dioxide, potentially linked to DNA damage and cancer, is banned in the EU, but it's in our children's food. Potassium bromate, a suspected carcinogen, banned in Europe and Japan. And you guessed it, it's in our children's bread. Food dyes such as red dye 40 and yellow 5 and 6 come with warning labels in Europe. They're linked to behavioral issues in children, but in the US, they're generally recognized as safe. I can't really blame the food companies. They're just doing what we've allowed them to get away with in a system that's taken on a life of its own. We all agree now that it's time to change the system, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I am today directing the FDA commissioner to start the process of changing the rules to eliminate the self-affirming GRAS pathway for new ingredients. I'm also directing the FDA and NIH to ramp up post-market assessments of GRAS chemicals currently in our food so that we can rapidly identify the compounds that are making Americans so sick, and so that American consumers and regulators can make informed decisions. This issue isn't going away. Moms aren't going to return to wanting chemicals in our food that are banned in other developed countries. Even industry knows that we have to change. So I promise you, I'm going to work with all parties, the companies, the moms, the scientists, the consumer advocates, to make American food the healthiest in the world the way that it was when I was a child.
Agreed. I changed what I said. I agree with everything that he just said. It is super weird that you would put a chemical in a food, and you have no idea whether or not that chemical is actually safe? And yet we do it. I mean, a corporation obviously would do it, right? Their job is to maximize their profit. If you get cancer in 30 years, okay, well, sad day for you. You can't prove that it came from that particular chemical. I'll go further. You put something in kids' food. That kid gets some kind of illness. Okay, how do you know that that illness came from that particular ingredient that was working and whittling its way, destroying the body of that child as the child was getting older? You don't. You have no idea. And his point is, okay, that needs to change. We need to change how we do this. If there are better health outcomes in Europe, and not just better health outcomes, people live longer. Okay, maybe they're doing something right. Maybe we're doing something wrong. Something needs to change. I am for that. Full-throated for that. I understand that people have certain issues with RFK. I will tell you this: when I saw the food manufacturers and these people freaking out, my thought was, hey, I like that. Maybe I want them to freak out. Maybe I want them to take notice that this is a problem. They do not care about whether or not your kid gets cancer. Full stop. They don't. They care about making as much profit as possible. That is problematic from the standpoint of the American public. And yet it's invisible to the American public. Like, this is when you go and get your baby food, you're assuming that the baby food is safe. Certainly, you don't want lead in your baby food. Okay, fair enough. Everybody agrees upon lead. Okay, what about something more dubious? What about something more insidious that takes longer to develop in regards to illness? Okay, well, that is the job of the health HHS. That is what they're supposed to be doing. You want the man on the wall making sure that your baby food, that your bread, that your candy is a safe product for you and your child. And I guess from my point of view, we currently don't know that. Not just currently don't know that. I am of the mindset that it is most likely probably not safe, that they have stuff in those things that is causing problems to the physical system. And by the way, you can expand this to the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, all of that stuff. I guess my thing is, you want a man on the wall. And RF Kennedy Jr., for whatever his failings, whatever his difficulties, he comes from this from the point of view of a corporate lawyer that fundamentally distrusts corporations, which I like. And so him going through this initiative, he is putting a standard out where you can judge him by that standard, which I also appreciate. He's saying radical transparency. I don't know if it's radical transparency, but it does seem to be a radical shift in the way HHS works and in the way that he wants HHS to operate. That is a shift I fundamentally agree with. So good on him for doing this. Let's see how far he can go with this. But good on him for doing it. The other issue I want to get to before my guest gets in is Greenland. Greenland. I want to show you something. This is Trump sitting with the head honcho at NATO, Rutte. I think it's Mark Rutte. Or Root or Rutte. Listen to what Trump says about another NATO country. This video is precisely why Trump effectively cucks Europe. Rutte gets cucked here. And for those of you who know what that means, it means a husband, boyfriend, watching his wife have sex with another woman and just stands there with his penis in his hand. That's Rutte in this video. Trump effectively says, we are going to take Greenland. We're going to take Greenland. We have troops stationed there. And we're going to take it. We're going to get it. And Rutte sits there like, interesting. Okay, what do you mean interesting, right? He didn't say interesting. I'm just saying Rutte sits there as the president, sits there with the leader of NATO and says, we are going to take a country that belongs to a NATO nation. And he does not have a hyperbolic response. He sits there as submissive as can be. Vassals. The reason that he can do this, when we blew up Nord Stream, you couldn't get Europe, despite the fact that it's damages. It's an act of terrorism on European soil. And the best that you can get out of Europe is the Russians blew up their own pipeline. And then it changed to Ukrainians did it. A few Ukrainians in a dinghy did it. And then it moved again to, okay, well, the Ukrainian state didn't really do it. It was a bunch of rich Ukrainians that decided at a drunken night that they were going to blow up a pipeline. They found the dinghy and they found divers to go into this dinghy and they blew up the pipeline. And so Zelensky is at fault because Zelensky had the idea. Now, this is pretty rich. Zelensky was sent into exile into the UK. And as a political opponent of Zelensky, there were threats to Zelensky that they would put him in a cage if he tried to run against Zelensky. Now, what Trump needs is his own man in Ukraine. And I'm not going into the Ukraine thing. I'm just trying to point out, if you as an American president stands there with the German chancellor and you say, we will blow up the pipeline if Russia goes into Ukraine. Russia goes into Ukraine, they blow up the pipeline. You as a German chancellor does not have a hyperbolic reaction of blowing up a pipeline that your country put billions of dollars into and completely required for the energy security of Germany. How submissive can you be? And so if you're an American president and you see that, okay, then Europe is passive. They're submissive. We can do whatever we want, including take Greenland. Listen to Trump here in the state. This is an astonishing statement to make, where you continuously point out, we are going to take Greenland. We are going to take Greenland. And what does Europe? Don't piss Trump off. Be submissive. Put your ass up for him. But don't piss off the gorilla.
Greenland. What is your vision for the potential annexation of Greenland and getting them potentially?
Well, I think it'll happen. And I'm just thinking, I didn't give it much thought before, but I'm sitting with a man that could be very instrumental. You know, Mark, we need that for international security, not just security, international. We have a lot of our favorite players, cruising around the coast, and we have to be careful. And we'll be talking to you. It's a very appropriate, really a very appropriate question.
It's an issue in the high north, so the Arctic. So what you did. So when it comes to Greenland, yes or not joining the US, I would leave that outside for me, this discussion, because I don't want to drag NATO in that. But when it comes to the high north and the Arctic, you are totally right. The Chinese are now using these routes. We know that the Russians are rearming. We know we have a lack of icebreakers.
I just want to point out, this Mark Rutte, head of NATO, and Trump is effectively saying, we are going to take Greenland. Does Greenland get a choice? According to Trump, maybe, maybe not. He is sitting here, and instead of pushing back on this, he's agreeing. He's agreeing. How do you agree to this? How are you sitting here with the US president saying, I am going to annex territory that does not belong to me for national security reasons? Okay, well, you can take Canada under national security reasons. You can try to take Mexico under national security reasons. You can take anything under national security reasons that you define. So the notion that Trump is sitting here saying, we're going to take Greenland. And Mark, I'm glad you're sitting here with me because, this may be pertinent to you as part of NATO. Okay, but that's weird. Greenland already has NATO troops on it, meaning it's already militarized in the sense of if anything pops off, NATO is already there. So why does the US need to annex it if it's already militarized? And the NATO commander, who should have a say in this, considering Denmark is part of NATO, just sits there with his thumb in his ass and agrees with the president in order to keep confusion down on that issue. How are you not rejecting this? How are you not saying, Mr. President, no, you can't take Greenland. They don't want to be part of the United States. Greenland has already said they don't want to be part of the United States. How you can't take Greenland? He cannot find anything in him to disagree on any level with Donald Trump, as Donald Trump sitting there saying they're going to annex territory that belongs to a NATO nation. That is astonishing. And not just astonishing, it gets across why Trump does it. Meaning, if I can make you submissive as you sit here beside me and we talk about something that should be off the table, then what stops me from taking it? What stops me from pushing on this issue? Nothing. Nothing. I'm going to let it play out. I'm not going to play the entirety of the video, but I'm going to play this one more time just to make the point crystal clear.
Greenland. What is your vision for the potential annexation of Greenland and getting them potentially.
Well, I think it'll happen, and I'm just thinking, I didn't give it much thought before, but I'm sitting with a man that could be very instrumental. You know, Mark, we need that for international security, not just security, international. We have a lot of our favorite players, cruising around the coast, and we have to be careful. And we'll be talking to you. It's a very appropriate, really a very appropriate question.
There's an
Thank
issue
you
in the
very
high
much.
north, so the Arctic. So what you did. So when it comes to Greenland, yes or not joining the US, I would leave that outside for me this discussion because I don't want to drag NATO in that. But when it comes to the high north and the Arctic, you are totally right. The Chinese are now using these routes. We know that the Russians are rearming. We know we have a lack of icebreakers. So the fact that the seven, outside Russia, there are 7 Arctic countries working together on this under US leadership is very important to make sure that that region, that part of the world stays safe. And we know things are changing there and we have to be there.
We just had an election there the other day. Do you see a referendum, a plebiscite, where the people of Greenland would be in a position to decide if they want to become part of the United States?
Yeah, it was a good election for us, as you know. It was not a referendum. It wouldn't be called that. It was an individual election. But the person that did the best is a very good person, as far as we're concerned. And so we'll be talking about it, and it's very important. Mark mentioned the word icebreaker. So we've ordered, we're in the process of ordering 48 icebreakers. And Canada wants to know if they could use them. I said, well, you got to pay for them. Think of it, Canada. We pay for their military. Canada pays very little for their military because they think we're going to protect them. But even with the icebreakers, so we're going to order 48, and Canada wants to be part of the deal.
So this is where he goes into the whole Canada should be part of the United States. They should be the 51st state. We're not going to protect them. They shouldn't have this belief that we're going to protect them. This is the threats against Canada. I'm pointing out, it is astonishing that the president is sitting here effectively talking about annexing Greenland, part or owned by a NATO country. And the NATO director, Mark Rutte, is sitting there, and he is not pushing back on this to any extent. He is just agreeing with Trump on the issue of, well, yeah, we need security, and security is an issue. And so, I understand where Trump is coming from on this. I'm not going to get involved. However, I will say that Russia and China is a problem. Russia and China uses these routes, blah, 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 blah. He has just said that he is going to potentially annex a country that is part of NATO. And your response is weakness. That is astonishing. And my point is, the exact reason that Trump does this is because he can. It's because he can. It's because he has that weak opposition coming out of Europe that effectively allows him to be the gorilla in the room without any backbone at all in Europe that would say, Mr. President, no. And say no to his face. They wouldn't do it. They can't do it. And so Trump does what Trump does. This is astonishing to me. I think I had Ritter on once, and Ritter said, Trump will get Greenland. And I said, how the hell do you suppose Trump gets Greenland? Trump will get Greenland. And all the conversations that were apparently taking place behind the scenes was don't piss Trump off. Effectively, don't be aggressive with your no, don't push back, don't say, don't make him angry, this type of nonsense. And then you get Rutte sitting here, complete inability to say no, complete inability to say, hey, this is a NATO nation. The NATO nation thing is, inviolable. We can't break this up in the way that you're talking about, effectively stealing a country that has said on more than one occasion, it does not want to be part of the United States. That is an amazing clip. That is an amazing clip. That clip tells you everything you need to know about Europe and why the U.S. treats Europe as a vassal state. It's amazing. To make this even more clear, you have Vance talking about Greenland, effectively saying Europe will scream, we don't care. We don't care what is coming out of Europe. We don't care if they're going to bitch and moan about it. We don't care. We need Greenland. Full stop. Period. That's all that matters, that we get our hands on it. That's all that matters. We don't care Europe's point of view on this issue.
Of America's citizens first. There's another.
Do you expect the U.S. to acquire Greenland?
I think it's possible, Maria. So here's the thing that I think a lot of folks don't appreciate about Greenland. It's really important to our national security. There are sea lanes there that the Chinese use, that the Russians use, that frankly, Denmark, which controls Greenland, it's not doing its job and it's not being a good ally. So you have to ask yourself, how are we going to solve that problem, solve our own national security? If that means that we need to take more territorial interest in Greenland, that is what President Trump is going to do, because he doesn't care about what the Europeans scream at us. He cares about putting the interests of America's citizens first. There's another angle to this whole Greenland thing, Maria, that people don't realize. You've got probably 55,000 people living on Greenland who are not actually happy with Danish government. They've got great natural resources there. They've got an incredibly bountiful country that the Danes aren't letting them develop and explore. Of course, Donald Trump would take a different approach if he was the leader of Greenland.
And
We don't care what Europe thinks. We don't care. We don't care. We don't care. We don't care. We don't give an F what Europe thinks. If we need Greenland for our own security, then we will take steps to deal with that issue. I don't care that the Europeans are going to scream. I don't care that the Europeans are going to take a different point of view. We don't care. That is amazing. Like, you must understand, the vice president of the United States is effectively saying our transatlantic partners, our allies, will complain bitterly about the fact that the US is annexing territory that belongs to Europe, and that Europe will complain about it, but they can't do anything about it. So we don't care. They have no hard power solution. They're not going to raise a military. They're not going to come after us. They're not going to do anything about it. They can't fight us. They can't beat us. If we take it, we take it. The best they can do is bitch and moan. And we don't care about the bitching and moaning. The weight of their condemnation in no way matters from our policy position on this issue. That is astonishing to say. Like the fact that you say that aloud, that is a level of disrespect. That is epic. It is scope and tone. I don't care what you think. And again, we're talking about people who are ostensibly allies. Allies that we have been fighting the Russians with, these allies, for the last 3 years. And Ben's just gonna, I don't care what they think. We don't care. We don't care. We don't care. That is an astonishing statement. Will Trump get his hands on Greenland? I have no idea. I have zero idea. If they go with this notion that we're going to annex it and we're going to use the troops at our disposal to do so, can he do that? I have no idea. Will he do that? I have no idea. Is this bluster? Is this him posturing with this notion of Greenland in order to try to get his hands on Greenland, meaning taking this kind of extreme position with the idea of getting something out of it because he's taking an extreme position? Like if you and I are talking and I say, I want your car. I'm not giving you my car. Okay, maybe I'm taking this position because maybe I need a ride. And maybe you'll give me that ride in negotiations about the car. It's that. The issue with this is we don't own Greenland. We have no claims on Greenland. We have no right to Greenland. He just wants it. He just wants it. And in his mind, Europe can't do anything about it if we decide to take it. Now, the catch is Trump taking this position because he just wants something in the negotiation? Meaning, I am taking this position. I am threatening you, yes, but I don't want to enact that threat. It's like a mob, right? That's a nice building you got. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it. I'm not saying anything is going to happen to it. I'm just saying it would be a shame if it did. So let's talk about ways to ensure that nothing happens to your business. Well, I don't want to give you money in order to keep my business afloat. I understand that. I do. I'm a compassionate man. Very compassionate. And I don't want to see anything happen to your business. So let's talk about ways to ensure that nothing happens to your business. Is it that? I'm just saying that's astonishing. I've never heard anything like that. If we need to take it, we will take it. Screw Europe. Screw Europe. We don't care if Europe complains. We will take it. That is an amazing statement. That is an amazing statement. That is a level of radical disrespect that I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like that coming out of the White House, especially when it's targeted at Europe. They would never say it with Russia. He would never say this with China. Meaning Trump would never say, we're going to take Taiwan. They would never do it because China actually has a military that will blow our shit out the water. And Russia has just shown militarily that they can defeat all of these countries combined militarily. So you can't do that with him, which makes it fascinating that he's doing it with Europe. Oh, it's fascinating. That is just utterly fascinating. Before I get to my guest, Peter, I think I saw him pop in and pop up. Let's go to the chat real quick. Wraith 36, gratitude, Jamal, gratitude back at you, Wraith. Thank you for that. Wanda or Wandy, USA, good morning, everybody. Good morning back at you, Wandy. Mr. Ripley, Trump's role in these policies is overstated. In my opinion, tariffs, unwinding of federal agencies, etc., they are symptoms of a failing globalization. Agreed. You have my full agreement. We realize that we can't compete on even terms-ish with China. And because we realize we can't compete, oh my God, they can build a car for $10,000 or whatever. Oh my God, they can produce all of these products that effectively are just as good as ours. Oh my God, they can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you as president are now in a position, I need to get more jobs. I need to make a better economy. I need to do all of this stuff. How do I do it? Oh, I'm going to protect America using tariffs as a protective mechanism of American business. Now, if you're a car manufacturer, you may like it because they're keeping Chinese cars out of the market. If you're anybody else, maybe you don't because your bills are effectively going higher. I agree with you totally. It's all about this notion of globalization and us trying to, let's say, find our footing in this kind of new world where BRICS exists, where Russia, China, India, where these have become the largest economies combined over the G7. Where does the US fit into this new space? I agree with you fully, Mr. Ripley. Janice Anderson, my sister had as good, what is this? Sculptors? I don't know what that is. My sister has Osgood Slaughters. She had bone chips removed from her knees surgically when she was 12 because of it. I'd never had bone chips removed. When I hit 17, it just stopped. It just stopped on a dime. It went from either when I was 6 or 8 all the way up to 17. Oh man, you're talking about pain. It's just constant pain. Anything that you do is pain. And it's only a level of, okay, is it horrible or is it less horrible? Anything you did, if you play basketball, oh my God, you were going to suffer. If somebody hit your knee, oh my God, you're on the floor. And it did this all through childhood. And then at 17, it just stopped. The doctor did say, look, at some point, this is going to go away, but this is going to suck for the time up to that point. And it did. But it sucked. I guess my thing is, where does stuff like that come from? Is it automatic? Does the body just break down? Or is it something that we are doing that is causing it in the way of the things that we eat, the way we live our life, the things that we breathe, the things that we drink? And if indeed it is related to those things, and it's not just magic, it's not just you hitting the lotto. I accept that there may be people who hit the lotto in regards to illness. Fair enough. It's life. Babies get cancer. But that's an oddity, right? And the argument that RFK made through the campaign trail was effectively, okay, this stuff was rare. This wasn't stuff that was happening continuously at the rate at which it's happening now. And he even goes into the stats on how many kids had childhood illnesses, let's say 50 years ago, compared to how many have them now, making a point of saying, okay, why did this change? And did this change as a direct result of something that we as a society is doing? I think he's right. Janice Anderson, shout out to you. Thank you very much. And Arlene Chambers, RFK Jr. essentially promoting food regulations, which is good. So why is he against the FDA? Because from his point of view, FDA and HHS has been corporate captured, that they are accepting things coming out of corporations, whereas they're supposed to be regulated. I'll give you a good example. I need to get to Peter, but hold on, Peter, for 1 second. the FAA is a perfect example. The FAA, instead of doing their job and regulating Boeing and checking to make sure that Boeing is doing its job to ensure those planes don't fall out the sky. Okay, well, they weren't doing that. Boeing had 2 planes fall out the sky, killing hundreds of people, including, if I'm not mistaken, the goddaughter or the granddaughter of, what is his name? What is his name? Ralph Nader, including one of his family members. We find out that Boeing decided to make an adjustment to the plane because they couldn't compete with Airbus. And the adjustment they made to the plane changed the mechanics of the way that plane flew in the air. They decided to use software to mitigate the changes of the way the plane flew. The pilots had no idea that that software was in the plane, and you had the pilots fighting with the software, in which case the plane crashed. Come to find out that the FAA was allowing Boeing to do its own safety checks. Boeing, that merged with another company, lost this notion of engineering and went into this idea of how can we maximize our profit, which damaged their capability in regards to engineering. Boeing had doors that blew out. They were having difficulties with the plane. I had interviews with people who used to work at agencies that oversaw this stuff, and they pointed out it got to the point where the planes were so bad that the pilots had to keep things in their minds of the way that the plane flew. Otherwise, it was going to damage the plane and the way the plane flew, meaning they had a fundamentally damaged product, especially Boeing 737. That was a direct result of the FAA not doing their job and effectively allowing a corporation to dictate and determine the safety of its own device. Which at that point, it's like, why do you have an FAA? Why do you need the cops if people can police themselves, right? I'm saying, and I guess RFK's point is, the FDA, the HHS were also under this notion of corporate capture, and that, in effect, needed to change. That's his point. That's his point. And by the way, I agree with that point. Michael Williams, new member, welcome to the family, Michael Williams. And with all that being said, waiting patiently, my man, Peter Coffin, I deeply appreciate you waiting on me to make that point. Peter Coffin, he is a journalist.
No, I was having sound issues. So.
Oh, fair enough. But Peter Coffin, he's a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In this book, Custom Reality and You, explore a world where profit is the driving force. He also has a new book that and I can see the cover, but I don't remember the name. It's about so far to the left that you end up on the right. It's Horseshoe Theory.
Horseshoe Theory is right, but not how you think.
That's it. Horseshoe Theory is right, but not how you think. How you doing, Peter? You doing okay this morning?
I'm doing great this morning. How about yourself?
I'm awake. I'm alive. I'm here. I can't complain. I can complain, but I'm not going to complain. No, I'm glad to have you, man. I want to talk about Democrats again for the government shutdown. I had this conversation with Margaret. I want to have this conversation with you because different people have different points of view. Chuck Schumer, who positioned himself as saying, I'm not going to accept this continuing resolution. Damn it, if we need to shut the government down, we'll shut the government down. I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take it. He had all of these Democrats backing him saying, yeah, Chuck, shut it down. Chuck. Don't accept this continuing resolution. F Donald Trump. We're not going to accept this. Shut it down. Now, this is different, right? Democrats typically believe in keeping the government open. It's in their ethos to do it. Republicans, less so. So it is an interesting position for Chuck Schumer to be that strong on the issue of shutting the government down. All right. Fast forward. You get this statement coming out of Chuck Schumer that I want to get your take on.
This week, Democrats offered a sensible way out. Fund the government for another month to give appropriators more time to do their jobs. Republicans rejected this proposal outright. Why did they reject it? Because Donald Trump doesn't want the appropriators to do their job. He wants full control over government spending. He isn't the first president who wants this, but he's the first president to cower his party into submission so that Republican rejection leads us to a decision. That Republican rejection leads us to a decision. And it's not really a decision, it's a Hobson's choice. Either proceed with the bill before us or risk Donald Trump throwing America into the chaos of a shutdown. This, in my view, is no choice at all. While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse.
Complete, utter, outright capitulation. That's what that speech is. Complete, outright, and utter capitulation. We can't do it. We can't go off the cliff. We must pass this bill because the shutdown is worse. Now, to be fair to Chuck, he could be right. The reality of it is there are unforeseen consequences to shutdown. What if you're blamed? What if you're blamed, right? What if the public says, okay, well, Democrats did this, not Republicans? What if you can't get it restarted? Meaning you don't get anything and you shut it down, right? Like what if at the end of it, Trump just says, all right, let it stay shut. Let it stay shut. I
All right, it's fine, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I'll move money around the way I want to move the money around. And Democrats are like, okay, but we want a month continuing resolution. Okay, you're not going to get it. Now what? So, like, he's not entirely wrong. I guess my issue with this is Schumer ran with this idea for more than a week that we're going to shut it down. We don't accept the continuing resolution. We don't like this. We don't like this. You had all of these other Democrats backing him on it. Shut it down. AOC, shut it down. Bernie Sanders, shut it down. All of these Democrats. And Chuck led them all the way out to the last step of the plank and then relented and capitulated. His back folded onto itself and then folded one more time. He caved massively. And the reason, according to the reporting, for why he did this is because he was getting so much pressure from either liberal groups, from other Democrats, they're saying, go out and do something. And so what he decided was the thing that I'm going to do, show that I'm fighting, is I'm going to pretend to shut the government down. Now, behind the scenes, all of the communication was, we can't do this. We can't do this. This is a horrible idea. This is bad. We're going to shut it down. This is a horrible idea. Okay, what the hell is this? What the hell is this? Chuck Schumer needs to resign.
Yeah,
Chuck Schumer
well,
needs to resign.
I mean, that's.
By the way, I'm not saying
right
shut the
about
government
that.
down. I'm just saying this is a stupid way to go about it when ultimately you were going to get the hit either way.
Yeah.
Why postpone it like this and give up all of these hopes of these Democrats? Now, it's weird for me to say that they hope to shut the government down. This sounds bizarre. Chuck Schumer needs to resign. What are your thoughts?
Yes. Well, obviously, yes. There are a million reasons Chuck Schumer should resign. This is the next in a long line of them. But as far as I'm concerned, when I think about just this situation, compress it down. You can't threaten things and then go back on the threat.
Yes.
You look weak. You sound like you're not willing to follow through on stuff. It looks bad. Like, it's just, you can't say you're a leader if like you're stop, start, jump, go, blah, 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 back and forth. Waffling is not leadership material. And therefore, if we're talking about, who should be the leader, again, this is the next in a long line of things. It just showed Chuck Schumer to be completely like, why do these people think that they're losing so much? Why do they think that? Like, it's because their strategy is bad. They don't try to appeal to anyone, like anyone. Like, that's the other, like, the groups that they traditionally try to appeal to have been slowly migrating away from them. I don't know. It seems like such a self-explanatory thing. He should not be the leader. He has presided over loss after loss. People don't care. This is insane. You can't threaten stuff and go back on it. Like, otherwise you prove that you're not willing to use any leverage that you have. And therefore it doesn't matter if you have power, you won't use it. Not that he has that much right now anyway.
Yeah. What was it? I think it was the originals. I love Vampire Diaries originals. There was a line I think that Klaus said is like, I think it was Klaus, I could be wrong. It was like, if you make a threat and you don't follow through, nobody takes you seriously. Like, meaning you can't threaten anybody else because nobody's going to take you seriously with your threat if you don't follow through with the threat. It's not, and again, I want to make it clear, it's not that I'm saying they should shut the government down. That's not really my argument. My argument is more so, why lead them out this far only to have to walk them back? And you can't walk them back. So, I mean, Axios is reporting that some Democrats are talking about basically, rage without the capability of doing anything about the rage. They said shutdown would give Donald Trump the keys to the city, the state, and the country. This is what Schumer said. And right here, it says all but one Democrat voted against the bill earlier this week, in part because it lacks language to keep the Trump administration from cutting congressionally approved spending. Basically, what their issue with the continuing resolution is, this is going to lock in levels going forward. And not just lock in levels going forward. Donald Trump is effectively going to get a free hand to decide how money is moved and shifted around. Democrats are like, this is outrageous. We don't want this. To make this even worse, right here, it says there are too many battleground Democrats in the House. They were uncomfortable, semi-comfortable with the vote. So one Democrat, the Senate left the House at the altar. The Senate left the House at the altar. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and remarks to House colleagues at their annual retreat. Oh, that's nice. At the annual retreat on Thursday. Lauded it for standing up to President Trump while voting against the bill, according to multiple sources. When he praised House Democrats' vote, he received a standing ovation. When he mentioned Senate Democrats, the members booed. The members booed. That is the best that they can do. That is, the culmination of their rage shown through booing, because you can't do anything politically about it.
We need to use a different definition of annual retreat here, I think.
That sounds horrible, right?
Yearly surrender.
At an annual retreat.
Their yearly surrender.
Yeah. Right. This is so bad.
This is a clusterfuck. Like, this is such
It is. It is. It looks horrible. And I guess my thing is, are Democrats going to appropriate the blame where the blame belongs? At their party. At their party.
Why would they do that? Like, have they ever had their slice of humble pie in the past? Like, they lost what could have been an easy election if they had just tried at all with the working class. And when I say the working class, I don't even mean like white men or any, like, a lot of people mean white men when they say that. I think that they just didn't try with anybody who has a job, basically.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And by the way, they lost those voters. They lost those
that?
voters in the election. They lost those voters. The
Oh, they did.
class ended up going to
Absolutely.
Republicans.
Well, and stuff like that McDonald's thing and showing up with the trash truck and all that stuff, it signaled to those people, even if he's not necessarily delivering on any of that, they haven't learned the lesson. You need to say something to the people who keep this country running, like people who work at McDonald's, people who pick up the trash, blah, blah, blah. You can't take a dump on those people. They didn't learn that lesson, and that's an easy lesson. This is an intermediate lesson.
Yeah.
I just don't see them learning. It's sad.
I want to get your take on something. I am super curious about no tax on tips. Now, Trump during the election was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to pass no tax on tips. And I thought to myself, that should have been a Democratic policy. If you think about it. Like, I get Republicans have an issue with taxes, right? Fair enough. But usually their issue is taxes for the rich, like tax for everybody else. I mean,
yeah. In fact, no tax on tips is an easy layup in terms of taxing the rich. You say, we're going to take the burden off people who do the work of keeping food in our mouths, and we're going to tax the rich. It's an easy like win, at least campaigning on it, even if not passing it.
But see, I think he wants to pass it. Like, I get the sense that he actually wants to pass it. Now, if that passes, and you're talking about, if I'm a waiter and I make $50K a year, and my job pays me $250 an hour to do the job, because some people may not know this, but as a waiter, you can make under minimum wage, like as an official payment from the restaurant, and the rest of the money comes in tips. You may not make even enough to pay taxes, and yet you're bringing in $50K a year. Okay, what does that guy think going forward? Is that guy a Republican now? because that money is now in his pocket. He knows that money is in his pocket, and he knows Donald Trump effectively put that money in his pocket. What about people on YouTube? Like everybody
we
gives.
talked about this last time. You brought that up, and I was like, the calculation stopped for me right there. I'm like, oh, wait, this affects me.
But that's my point, Peter. That is precisely my point. It's one thing for a Republican to say, I am going to give a tax break to the rich. Okay, we don't care about that. In fact, we're probably going to be against it. When he says, I'm going to give a tax break to the poor and to the middle class all across the country, where the majority works in service jobs where they get tips, what does that do to the Democratic Party, who is in shambles, who in their own conception of themselves know they're in shambles, who have no political opposition in real terms to Trump, and they're just waiting for him to fall over himself? What does that do? Like, and does that, are we seeing, I guess what I'm asking in real terms, are we seeing a reshuffling of the political space where Republicans are reaching out to working class voters in the context to which they understand reaching out to working class voters is taxes? That is our thing, right? Taxes. Okay, well, what if we give the workers a tax break? What if we give the poor a tax break? Does that make those people more likely to vote Republican? I'm fascinated by that because it seems like it's a polarity shift.
To me, it seems like it does. I don't know how. Like I said, even if you didn't pass it, even if you just campaigned on it, that's so much more than the Democrats tried to do that materially changes anyone's life. And that's the thing. When you, even if you're like, so Bernie Sanders, we can, I think, agree is a massive disappointment now. But when Bernie Sanders campaigned, and he campaigned on Medicare for all, something that would materially affect every person in the United States, that resonated with people, lots of people, not any one group either. Like he won Nevada on the strength of Hispanic voters. Like it was something like 50% of the votes that he got were Hispanic voters, which is absolutely nuts. When you consider, how traditionally people vote for the establishment candidates in these types of things, and it's not necessarily because they prefer the establishment candidates, that's who they think has the chance to win, so they vote for that person. There's a reason why people care about stuff that materially affects. I feel like I'm saying something that's so incredibly simple. It's just like if something changes your life, even in a small way that makes your life easier, that's already more than the other people have done.
Yes.
It doesn't even have to be a lot. If it's anything.
And Democrats don't get it.
They don't.
Like, I don't know why they don't get that. Like meaning, look, if you put money in my pocket, I'm going to appreciate the fact that you put money in my pocket.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the $300 for kids, whether it's all of the money that I get in tips on YouTube I can keep, whether it's whatever that is, right?
Oh man.
Yeah. Or the Uber driver, all of the tips they get to keep. Or that is astonishing, right? And you're not talking about a little bit of change. You might be talking about $20,000, $30,000 that they're effectively saying you can keep. Now the catch is, are they going to pass it? If they pass it, oh my God, will they do it? Now I think the problem that they're going to have is, we also want to destroy Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, which then loses everybody.
Yeah, that's definitely a big problem, and I think they have run up against a lot of resistance with that already, even with their own people. I've seen a lot of MAGA people who are like, no, none of that.
Yeah,
we
didn't
got you in not for that.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. They have to. Here's the big problem if they do pass tax for tips. Where does the money that would have come in from that tax revenue, where does it come from? Because I don't care if they cut Social Security and Medicaid. That's not the most money they're spending. They spend more money in plenty of other places than either of those programs, which is insane because those are huge programs. But like the U.S. military or and various things, U.S. military is what comes to mind. where does the money come from? Because the tax for tips is a large part of the tax revenue. It is not, like, to be clear, it does represent a problem if they pass it, as much as it represents a big win for people like yourself and myself, and people who work in Uber and DoorDash and people who do gig economy work, because frankly, gig economy people are screwed heavily by tax for tips, because tips is kind of where your real income comes from there. Like, you do a delivery with DoorDash and you get a tip of $4. You do 2 deliveries in an hour. That's like your hourly wage for real. You do get paid for the delivery, of course, but that's where the real money comes from. And same goes with waitresses and waiters, et cetera, et cetera. The way I see it, it represents quite a problem, but also politically speaking, whoever does that, it kind of doesn't matter what the problem it creates is, because it puts an infinite amount of cachet in their corner, as far as I'm concerned. There's like, because so many people work in the gig economy now. We don't live in, like, for instance, Starbucks baristas are in the gig economy now in a certain ways, because they do tips. Like, their service is not making you coffee, it's smiling and making you feel welcome at Starbucks. That's their actual job. Their on paper job is making coffee, and they get paid a wage for that. But you tip them if you're like, oh, that person was quite pleasant, blah, blah, blah. That's their real job, and that's where the real money comes from. Ultimately, but if you're taking a large portion of that, it's a lot of money. Suddenly, these Starbucks workers who are protesting for progressive causes and against Trump, suddenly they're like, am I a conservative? That's what I seriously see that being something that a bunch of people entertain, because, to be frank, that is a huge section of the economy now who is automatically screwed over by, to be frank, it's harder to pay taxes on tips because you're not having that withheld like employment income. It's stuff that, like, if you needed that money this month, it's gone. That's the problem with that. And I've been there a lot of times, because over the last decade, I've done way more work that I get, that I either do 1099s for or it counts as tips. And to be frank, that stuff, well, man, it's hard to pay that tax.
Don't reveal something illegal, Peter. No,
I pay it. No, I pay it. I'm saying it's difficult to pay it. Sometimes it takes a couple of months to pay it. Yes, because that money may be needed, right? Yeah. It's not just taken out of your check. No, I agree with you. I don't care what the problem is with it. Like, meaning, I don't care. No,
like,
I
if
don't
they
care
do
either. I would prefer that they.
It costs $5 trillion. I don't care. I'll be honest with you, and it put me in the mindset of Republicans in a weird way. Not agreeing with them. It's not that, but when they are thinking in the sense of, I don't care if this tax cut that Trump is going to pass is going to cost $5 trillion. I'm rich. I want more money. And if he's going to do it, I'm going to accept it. Okay, but I think the situation is a bit different, though. It's like, it's one thing if you're poor or middle class and he's passing a tax cut and putting money in your pocket. Okay, well, that's different than putting money in the hand of somebody who already is a billionaire or has $1 million several times over. Those are very different realities.
Absolutely.
If I was a Republican in Congress, I would leave Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid alone, and I'd do that. And I would make a pitch for the working class. That's what I would do. Because for me, okay, I can come back to these later. I need to get these people on my side first and foremost, and I can undercut the Democratic Party by effectively doing what will a Democrat. It's a Republican approach to getting a Democratic voter, if that makes sense. Because that's the way I look at it. A Republican approach to getting a Democratic voter. And
like
the Democrats aren't powerful.
Wait till you see the Starbucks baristas with MAGA hats. It's just going to be, wait till you see it.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
They are foolish for going after Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
They are
just
That's going to be a big issue if they do that.
Yeah. I mean, they're giving Democrats a check. Focus on working class. You got Vance in there. Vance often talks about the working class, focus on the working class. And you would get farther on this. And you could cripple the Democratic Party going forward for a generation. Like, they are missing their chance. And I thought that, and I'm going to let you after this. I honestly thought that about the first Trump term, that Trump wasn't beholden to anybody. He could do whatever he wants. He could do some lefty stuff. He could do some stuff to the right, and he could split the opposition. And he's kind of doing it now. On the issue of Ukraine, for example, real lefties want this war to be over with. They're anti-war. They're like, if he's going to end it, great. Liberals, not so much. The majority of the American public wants the war to be over with. So liberals are out of alignment with where the public is on this issue. The problem for Trump is that Elon Musk is there. I would wager that the public doesn't like him, or at the very least what he's doing. Nate Silver has just come out with polling showing that Trump's polling over the course of the week has dropped because you're getting the stock market to drop. People are freaked out about what he's doing with this tariff war around the globe. And people are like, okay, we didn't vote for this. We voted for a strong economy, and you're effectively wrecking the economy. I don't know, they think about this stuff differently than I do. I guess I think about this stuff in the sense of how can I get more political power? And how can I do that? Oh, I can do that by effectively getting the working class on my side. Okay, how do I do that? I do that by A, not destroying social safety net, A, and B, doing something that is a bone to a group that the Democratic Party has fundamentally ignored. I don't know. I think about this stuff differently. Peter, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
You got a scale here. You got on one hand the tip stuff. I think it's a no-brainer. If they pass that, they've got as long as they don't screw up, they've got everybody sort of eaten out of their hand. On the other hand, cutting Medicare and Social Security, that's the screwing up. Like if you do that, it counteracts the other thing. I don't know what the calculus is right now. It feels like they're kind of almost moving randomly at the moment.
They're Republicans.
Yeah.
This is what they believe in. Like I don't know why people are shocked that they're doing Republican things.
No, it's not shocking. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's what Republicans do. They don't believe in government in that way. And so when they get the opportunity, and it's not like a Bush Republican where they're like, okay, we're going to do this in a tepid way because we don't. He's like, no, we're just going to put an axe to it. That's what we're doing. We're putting an axe to it. What are you going to do to stop me? Oh, you can't do anything to stop me because you don't have the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, or the presidency? Sucks for you. Sad day. This is what we're doing. The question is, will there be a backlash? And as someone pointed out to me, unfortunately, they pointed out, look, cutting workers of Social Security will not be enough to get an uprising to defend Social Security. People expect delays. They've grown accustomed to it. This is America. Things that work well. And as they've grown accustomed to it, to get rid of all of these workers and Social Security say, hey, your notice or your check is going to be delayed. Your admittance to Social Security will be delayed by several months because of the people that have been fired from the job. They made the argument the American public will accept that because that's what they're used to. I can't say they're wrong. And it sucks. Peter, it's like, yeah, I agree. Everything you just said.
I wish I could say something that counteracts any.
I was hoping you were going to give me a counter argument to that to make me feel better, but I'm not going to give a counter argument.
It's just kind of like, looks like you're spitting the truth this morning.
That sucks so bad. It's like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. We're going to take that hit. That's going to be a hit that we take. That sucks because I don't have this expectation that Democrats are later going to come back and say, okay, now we need to fight for Social Security. I don't get that sense. I get the sense of it's just going to ride as is going forward.
I feel they're just incompetent at this point. That's the most I can give them. Like, they don't know what to do at any given time. They've changed directions all the time. It's just the Democrats look dumb. It's just they look dumb.
Why? The question is why? Like if I'm playing chess and I have it gives me an objective, it gives me a point of view that I operate from. And in that point of view, I make moves based upon what I'm trying to accomplish as larger objectives. It's the larger context that's in mind that informs what I do. Why are they random? Why are they random? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, how are you a random?
Best I can figure is donors. Like, that's the best I can figure. I feel like they act in the interests of a very small number of people that you and I, we don't think like. That's the best I can figure.
I think to myself, my mom always said she never wanted me to be a lawyer. She said, lawyers are liars. I don't want you to be a lawyer or a politician. They lie for a living. I don't want you to do it. And I think to myself, if I was in a political space and I needed to get elected, and I know that 90% of the money is what the side that wins 90% of the time is by the side that gets the most cash. That means in order for me to get elected, even if I have the best of ideas, even if I have things that I want to accomplish, I'm still me. And I say, okay, so I need to take money. And then I say, okay, well, who's going to give me the money? And these people say, we're going to give you money. And they say, what do you believe in? Medicare for all. I want expand Social Security. I want $15 minimum wage. And I said, whoa. That's a lot there, buddy. I don't want the increase in minimum wage because I have a business. I don't want to have to pay my workers $20 an hour. So I can't really give you money for that. And I can't really give you money for Medicare for all unless you can find a way to do it that doesn't affect me in any real way. Now, I may make the argument to them like, look, you're paying for healthcare, and that is a bill that would no longer be on your back as a business that would allow you to compete better with other countries, other companies, et cetera, et cetera. We can bring it to a government level, meaning I can make that argument to them. And they can still say, yeah, but you're raising my taxes to do that. So I don't even feel comfortable with that. So then I say, okay, what can I get accomplished that doesn't piss these people off? And now you're doing crumbs when you got into this for this big stuff. Is like, I keep thinking, is that what they're functioning under? And would I function in the same way if I was in a political space? I don't have an answer to that.
I would be killed.
You'd be killed.
I would just be killed. Like, I straight up, I'm never going to run for anything because I would be assassinated. I would make a lot of people very angry very quickly.
You would try to. You would try to.
Yeah.
How do you get elected?
Like, direct superiors would be mad at me.
But how do you get elected? How do you even get into the space?
I don't know how I would get elected. That probably wouldn't happen.
It weeds people out.
Yeah.
It weeds people out. Peter, always appreciate you, my man. Peter Coffin, he's a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, a podcaster, and an author. In the book, Custom Reality and You, they explore reality where profit is a driving force. Peter, where can people find you, and name your books for the audience?
Well, my most recent long-form book is Woke Ouroboros, Segregation and Essentialism. You can find that, as well as a lot of books, short and long, on Amazon if you search my name. Also, youtube.com/Peter, youtube.com/ either Very Important Documentaries or Important D's, which I think it's a funny little... I think that's a funny abbreviation. I'm not going to explain why. I started thinking, how do I explain why that's funny? Nah, maybe I shouldn't. But yeah, I do a series called Very Important Documentaries on YouTube, and I also do youtube.com/Peter. Just kind of, I stream, I talk, et cetera, et cetera.
Badass, man. Always appreciate you, Peter. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
You be safe. Have a good one, man.
You too. You too.
All right. We have come to the end of another show. 114 episodes. We're at 42,700 people, if you can believe it, starting at 30,000. So we have put on 12,000 over the course of these 114 shows. You guys have allowed that to take place. I deeply appreciate all of you for it. Hit the like button. Definitely share this content. Let me go to the chat. I want to get to the chat before I close. And we have Alexander G. Why is it that not primitive indigenous gets no protection? Alexander, I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for that. I'm not even sure what primitive indigenous, I don't even know what that is. Fair enough. You are far more involved into that than I am. I am sorry for not knowing what that is. I'm not a perfect man. I don't know everything. I don't know what that is. But pursuant to not knowing what that is, I also don't know why they don't. Thank you, Alexander. You deeply appreciate it. We have a new member, Michael Williams. Welcome to the family, Michael Williams. Arlene Chambers, RFK Jr. is essentially promoting food regulations, which is good. So why is the FDA, why is he against the FDA? I did mention that earlier in the video, and I may cut that as a separate video into itself. Yeah, I may cut that as a separate video into itself. Right here. My sister had Osgood slaughters. Also, she had bone chips removed from her knees surgically when she was 12 because of it. My heart goes out to you as somebody who also had Osgood slaughters. I did not need to have it to that level. Pain, yes, constant, ever present pain. Mr. Riffley, Trump's role in these policies is overstated, in my opinion. Tariffs, unwinding of federal agencies, etc., are symptoms of a failure of globalization. I agree with you to a point. I mean, this is Republican orthodoxy. That's my thought. Like, when have you ever known Republicans be like, we love government, with the exception of military, or taking away protections in some way? I guess I'm saying Trump is only doing what other Republicans wanted to do, and if they had the courage, would do. It's that part, at least from my point of view. When he got in, I just assumed Trump is going to do Republican stuff. Trump is doing Republican stuff. When he does something that is beyond the Republican stuff, then I will holler. Right now, I'm not going to be hyperbolic. Wandy, USA, good morning, everyone. Good morning back at you, Wanda. And Wraith 36, gratitude, Jamal. He's saying gratitude because I gave him a shout out before the show even started. I was watching like Batman in the rafters. Guys, I want to thank all of you for joining me. I'm going to call it a day. Garland and I are going to do our show later today at 4 p.m. So definitely look out for that. Interesting things. I'm glad Scott agreed with me. Again, my take, this was all theater. My take was that these guys, Trump is working between the lines that he believes he needs to work between. You're a U.S. president. Being weak is not part of the modus operandi. Looking weak in a negotiation, even if you have no real leverage, is not part of the process of an American president that America is used to, or for that matter, want to see. And so if you are trying to unravel a war and you're going with this idea of unprovoked aggression, Russia is a threat, all of this nonsense, you have to unravel that. That has to be unwound. And more to the point, you need a Ukrainian government that is going to sign on the dotted line that we capitulate, we give up, we surrender, we are done. You've kicked our ass. That's what you need. Zelensky is not that guy. Zelensky has fundamentally gone rogue, which means you need to bring a horse to water and you need to make the horse drink. And as Scott pointed out, that's not just Ukraine, that is also Europe. And so when Trump throws it out there, hey, let's have a 30-day ceasefire. Okay, well, they already know that Russia is going to knock that down. The question is, how do you knock that down? Do you just blow it off? We don't give a shit what Europe thinks and America thinks at this point. Or do you do what Putin did, where you say, we're open to this. We're open to this. However, we need to talk about this point, this point, this point, and this point. And while we talk about this point, this point, and this point, we will continue to beat the shit out of Ukraine on the battlefield. We are on a 2,000-mile front. We are in an offensive on that 2,000-kilometer front. And we are expelling Ukrainian troops from Kursk. So we will discuss and we will come to terms. And as we come to terms, we will finish what we need to do on the battlefield. So when those terms are finally discussed in earnest, we get what we want. Now, Trump knows this. Rubio knows this. Every world leader knows this. And yet, we're having this farce of a game as if nobody knows this. That's why I call it theater. Now that Putin has done this, he has given space for Trump to proceed further with negotiations because Putin didn't just kill it outright. Of course, they killed it outright, but they left the door open for the US president to be able to say, all right, I heard his response. That seems favorable. He's not killing what I'm saying, which is good for an American audience and is good for a world audience because it gives Trump space in which to work further in regards to the negotiations, knowing full well that Russia is not stopping until they accomplish their military objectives and that there's nothing that that the US or Europe can do to stop them from doing so. The Ukrainian military will collapse if this keeps going. Trump knows this, Putin knows this, every other world leader knows this. Whether Zelensky knows this or not, who knows? Doesn't matter, almost. I'm pointing out that what is taking place is I'm not going to call it a game. But what is taking place is theater for everybody else as Trump unravels this war and tries to find a way to not just unravel the war, but also to do it where he does not look bad. He does not look weak. Nobody is screaming at him that he's Putin's puppet or he's Putin's bitch and these type of things, but that he is a strong American president that is leading the way to end the war. That's what he wants. How do you do that? We'll see. We'll figure it out. Meaning, this is what we're watching now with Putin, weirdly enough, helping him in that by being open to a ceasefire that they are no way going to accept under the terms to which the ceasefire was made. When we get security guarantees, when we get guarantees that you're not going to add more military, when we get guarantees that there's not going to be a NATO membership, when we get these guarantees that we need, and these fuckers are out of curse, we've made our way on the battlefield, we'll come to a ceasefire under the notion that the ceasefire is really a negotiation for a long-term sustainable contract of sorts between Russia and the US that Europe as a vassal would automatically get lumped into. I could be wrong. That is my logic of events because in my mind, it's chess logic. You have to work between the lines. And as a president, you have political issues that you have to take into context. What does it look like if Trump just walks? The screaming would be voluminous. And they would say, Ukraine lost because Trump left. It's not true, but that's what they would say. That's not really what you want as the guy who's supposed to make deals and who came into this saying, I'm going to end the war. Okay, walking is not exactly ending the war. Kind of, but not. It's ending it in a way where they just fundamentally collapse on the battlefield. That is not really what you want as US president. And to be more honest, there are things that Trump may want from Russia where Ukraine is just a chip on the table. Now, Ukraine may not like that position. They may feel some kind of way about being a chip on the table of Donald Trump's grand bargain deal that he wants to make with Russia and even on some level with China. But you lost the war. And fact of the matter is, the fact that you're a chip on the table is a better position to be than if the conversation was purely about the war, because there's nothing to negotiate in the context of a surrender. You just surrender. Or your military fundamentally collapses and Russia goes to the border of Poland. I would wager to you that that is a worst case scenario for Europe. And maybe on some level, Trump requires weakness in the Ukrainian military to be more clarified in order to get them to capitulate. I don't know. It's fascinating. But I'm not going to take the social media hysteria that I've seen of people screaming betrayal when, in all honesty, what did they think this was going to look like? Like, what did they really believe? What was going to take place? Did they think Trump was just going to tell Zelensky, sign a deal? And what happens when Zelensky says no? Then what? Like, what do you think it will look like for an American president to unravel a war that Europe and the US and Canada has been involved in for the last 3 years, where they have called Putin everything but a child of God? They've called him Satan. They've called him, they say he had cancer. They say he was going to die. All of the stuff that they were saying, Russia's running out of weapons, all of this nonsense. And now the reality is they are terrified. Terrified. You have a 1 million man Russian army that has been killing and dying for the last 3 years, that are battle hardened, and that was even willing to go into an oil tunnel on what seems to be a suicide mission. Some people say it's not, but okay. I guess my point is, how do you unravel that? What does that look like in practice? And is it the president falling over himself to give Russia anything that it wants? Or is it the strong man being a strong man, even when a strong man has no leverage in the process? I think it's that. I think that's what we're saying. So I could be wrong. I could be talking purely out of my ass. Trump could backtrack, any of those things. Fair enough. There was a report that he allowed weapon shipments to go through. But again, so what? Weapon shipments have been going through for the last 3 years. It hasn't necessarily made a difference on the battlefield in real terms, at least not now, considering the manpower shortage. And even if he passes sanctions again, so what? statutes have been passed for God knows how long. What does one other matter? All of these things could be elements of a strong man trying to be strong in the context of a negotiation, which is what Donald Trump is in. Whether he has leverage or not, he has to show, or at the very least give the appearance that he does. So, no, I'm being cautiously optimistic. I'm not taking a hyperbolic position on the negotiation that's taking place. At some point, there will be a conversation between Putin and Trump. I would imagine that conversation is going to be about all sorts of things. That conversation may even take place next week. It may take place relatively soon. And like they've already talked an hour and a half prior, meaning the context of what was going on has already been discussed. So we will see how this unfolds. We will see how this unfolds. It is fascinating to watch. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I guess, I guess it's difficult to just say, screw it, I'm done. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I want to thank all of you for joining me. I want to give a shout out to each and every person that has been here. Oh, we have one more. Larry Dean. Hi. Just hi. Hi, back at you, Larry Dean. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I'm thinking, do I want to play some chess? I may start a chess game. I think I'm going to get some chess in. But look, I want to thank all of you. Shout out to all of you. Deeply appreciate all of you joining me for this, and deeply appreciate all of the contributions. You make this show what it is. Yeah, coffee always helps. Have a good one, all. Be safe. Have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Signing off.